Salute to the flag.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In case of fire, there are two ways to exit the chambers. To my left, your right is to the double doors. Turn left down the flight of stairs. Turn left at the base of the stairs and out straight outside of the building. Or the best way to perhaps is at the back in the double doors, and in that case, just down the steps and out. Again, get away from the building as quickly as possible. Secretary, please take the roll.
Charles Duran.
Here.
Charles Ladd.
Here.
Nick Lefakis, absent. Mary Scott.
Here.
Ken Nelson.
Here.
Virginia Higley.
Here.
Linda DeGray, absent. Sarah Gruber, absent. Guillermo Salazar, absent. And Richard Suzak is here.
Okay, to start, Steve Cogitella has left a lengthy note to us, and it is in our paperwork that we have on our desks, and I'll refer to it so that it gets placed in the records. There are sign-up sheets on the right, which I will call from. We ask that at present, there are no time limits. We just ask that you don't be redundant. If you hear someone else has said something, you can say you agree. But again, we will be taking notes, and this does end up, we'll have a presentation by Ms. Whitten on the program. And I don't know what you had or if you've been on the internet. If you've got the line by line and section, you have the pictures, I guess, and the maps of the divisions. And we will try to answer your questions. And Lori, if you want to, I guess.
Running the show, girl.
Good evening. Okay, I'm not used to these microphones. So I am Lori Whitten. I am the Director of Development Services. I've been here for, just under 2 months. So this is new to me, but it's a wonderful presentation and wonderful regulations that have been provided for a draft. These are really in response to the revitalization of Thompsonville, the development energy associated with the transit-oriented development and the new rail station. So I'm just going to go through these slides that was provided by our consultant. Some pictures of our existing zoning, our R33 transit, Thompsonville Village Center, special development districts, and some industrial and business general and business local. The proposal is to change those to more of what we are calling river gateways. And these river gateways are basically 5 different new zones for the heart of Thompsonville, and each one basically talks to the type of housing and the type of retail or business use that may be permitted. River Gateway 1 would be the least dense, leading all the way up to the River Gateway 5, which is more dense. And we'll get a little bit more detailed about that in a little bit. Okay, so the next slide, please. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So the River Gateway 1 is really to preserve municipal space, open space, and riverfront and natural resources. In addition to that, it is also to preserve the single-family component that is along the river. So at this point, with these regulations, single-family is a permitted use. You could still have your single-family homes and your accessory uses, your decks, pools, sheds, things of that nature. So nothing really changes there. They're going to be promoting greenways and parks. River Gateway 2 is to provide more of a walkable residential neighborhood with a diversity of housing choices. Now, this will go up to single-family and maybe up to 3 to 4 family residential dwelling units. There's really no retail or commercial development promoted in that gateway. And River Gateway 3, again, walkable residential neighborhood, diversity of housing. We will also be providing for age-restricted housing in this zone. And I think the other use that was new to this was B&Bs, bed and breakfasts, municipal uses and playgrounds. And River Gateway 4 is more to allow the more diverse housing and higher density housing. This will allow for a lot more services, retail, lodging, age-restricted housing, and also food service. So restaurants and things of that nature would all be allowed in this zone. Well, minimally. And Gateway River 5 is to preserve and provide walkable neighborhood commercial districts, provide feet on the street, local services, and multi-uses in the same area. So we've got single and multifamily residential, retail, service, office, medical offices, mixed-use structures, and municipal uses. I'm getting a little trend here on the municipal uses.
For reference, that photo is, if you're familiar with the center of Mansfield in Storrs by Yukon, that's the type of development that they're looking for in River Gateway number 5, and that's like kind of context of what they're looking for there.
Mm-hmm. So a higher density mixed use component, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good. I didn't know that. So this is the existing zoning versus recommended standards. The big thing is that right now, most of the residential lots that are out there are non-conforming to the current zoning, which is R33, which requires a 33,000 square foot lot. Most of these lots are more around 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. So this will actually make a lot of the parcels conforming as opposed to non-conforming to the current zoning. The front yard setbacks and basically the bulk and area setbacks have all been diminished from the R33. The impervious surface areas have been increased since the lots have decreased, so it makes sense that you might have more covered on the lot than you would otherwise. And parking as well has diminished from what was usually permitted or required. So in most towns, if you have one dwelling unit, you almost always require 2 parking spaces, and these requirements will be more like 1 per dwelling unit plus 1 per bathroom or 1 per bedroom. So that doesn't make sense, actually. I was looking at something else that had a different dimension on here. So there was something somewhere. There was some.
Do you have the capabilities of putting up tables 6.2, which
Yeah, in the
graphically
regulations. Yeah, I think that this was
gives
modified.
the uses?
Yeah, we'll put that up in a minute.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that there was also a financial component with this project. They did a financial analysis, and there's a slide after this. Yeah. So these are the different areas that they did a financial feasibility study on. So there was, I think, 7 sites, 6 or 7 sites. And they came up with some conclusions. And that's also on the next page. The opportunity to develop up to 282 new residential units, 46,000 square feet of commercial space. The estimated financial return rates are relatively low, so they suggested that there'd be some sort of a financial incentive, whether it be a tax increment financing or some sort of subsidy, public-private partnerships to make it more profitable for the developer. Higher density, of course, will afford the developer a little bit more profit. So you've got more dwelling units on a smaller piece of property. Cost of parking will need to be subsidized. Parking is part of every plan, and it's very expensive, and even if they say that you're not getting parking, you're still paying for it. So it ends up that parking is a critical component. And that's despite the fact that we're trying to decrease the parking in this area because of the transit-oriented development, millennials that don't want the cars, the elderly that aren't driving. It still is a cost to the developer. And then, again, they'd suggest maybe a public-private partnership to ensure success for this type of zoning. So, and then we have our regulations, which I'm sorry we did not make copies of all the regulations, but that we're going to put them up on the screen for you and just go through them. Is that? Yeah, that's it. So again, this is the River Gateway District. You should have all gotten a copy of this page. And on the back of it is the River Gateway map, and they're up here on the corner if you didn't get one. So again, River Gateway 1 is preserved municipal and open space, riverfront, and natural lands for public use. Single-family residential is a use permitted there by right for the existing. I do believe that they are requiring a special permit for that use in the future, though. Accessory uses are basically boats, RVs, sheds, decks, pools. So those are still things that you could still do with your residential lot. River Gateway 2, residential neighborhood with a diversity of housing choices. Again, these are single-family to 4 dwelling units, age-restricted housing, and accessory uses. The development is proposed to be historic, consistent with the historic patterns of the neighborhood. Gateway 3, walkable residential neighborhood with diversity of housing choices and higher density housing. That is single family up to 5+ dwelling units, age restricting houses, and B&Bs, municipal and playgrounds. Gateway 4, this is supposed to be right next to the rail station, basically taking in the leverage of the Freshwater Brook and Connecticut River to benefit the residents, excuse me. So we're really playing into having access to the river and Freshwater Brook, and there'll be other bike ped paths that play into this scheme as well. That is also single family up to 4 dwelling units, restaurants, retail, lodging. And then River Gateway 5 is pretty much everything is permitted there. You've got all of your parks, commercial recreation, churches, offices, retail, restaurants, as well as housing. So then it goes into the area and bulk requirements. And this is where your setbacks are. That would be the next page, please. So again, could you get the next page, please? There we go. There. So currently, the lot areas are 33,000 square feet. I mean, that would be the requirements for any lots out there in the residential zones. And this will now permit them to be about 4,000 square feet. The frontages will be down to 50 feet from 150 feet. The front yards will be reduced from 40 feet down to 20 or 10 in the RG5. The side yards will be reduced from 25 feet to 10. The rear yards will be reduced from 50 feet down to about 20 feet or 10 to 20, depending on the RG5 requirements. And dwelling unit floor area is going to be between 600 and 800 square feet, which is a nice little apartment, or house for that matter. And then the building coverages actually goes up, increases from 20% to 40 through 80%, depending on the river gateway. And similarly with the impervious coverage. So with the smaller lots, you're going to have more coverage. And heights are somewhat the same. In R33, it's about 35 feet, and these will be anywhere up from 35 to 55 feet. Notes to this table basically talk to waiverability and allowances. So the commission may approve smaller front yards. The rear yard can be 20 foot in depth if the adjoining a building containing exclusively residential use or greater than 50%. You may have an unenclosed front porch up to 10 feet into the required front yard setback. And freestanding canopies attached to the building may be erected forward to the front building line as well. Buildings may be built up to the common lot line, so that's basically a zero lot line development, provided the other party walls or separating them are of certain construction, such as masonry, without openings. And the next page, please. Where the property abuts the river or any water course, basically they may go up to, it is the minimum setback from the mean high water mark instead of the rear property line. So nobody gets flooded that way. Well, we hope nobody gets flooded. There's just some other requirements that are the same as other sections of the regulations, and then they are allowing some height exceptions. So the next section of the regulations basically talks to the uses, which I've actually explained in a couple sections already. I just kind of highlighted what they were. And if we go on to the next one, please. Yeah, the next one. I couldn't fix that one. So the bottom of that page, please. So I just wanted to, again, to reiterate, the single-family uses can still be single-family. You could still have your boat, you could have your RV. It's supposed to be behind the front line of the house, but you could still have these things. You could still have home occupations or professional offices, swimming pools, and the like. So I had heard a lot of concerns about people thinking that they were not going to have their single-family abilities anymore. But I think that is not the case with this. Moving on to section 6.3, the River Gateway 5 requirements. Essentially, this requires that the first floor of any building, in any new building, will require to be retail, restaurant, service, recreation, office, or other, where residences are prohibited but promoted on the second or higher levels. And if you want to demolish anything, you do need a special permit, and there's going to be a review as to what's being demolished and whether or not the facade should be preserved or not. Here we go. The parking requirements under section 6.4, again, residential buildings with 2 to 4 units will provide for 2 parking spaces per unit. But if it's in mixed use, you get, with 5 or more dwelling units, provide 1 parking space plus 0.5 parking spaces per bedroom. That's what I was remembering seeing. So we had pulled that slide from the consultant's slides, but they were still a little bit old, so I apologize for that. So retail sales, 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Personal service, 4 spaces per 1,000 gross, and office, 3 spaces per 1,000. Those are pretty consistent with a lot of regulations. And again, those are actually a little bit lower than the norm with R33s and the other business local and business general. And the parking area design standards, in the River Gateway 5 in particular, that we are, you're not going to be able to have more than 60 feet of parking pavement up along the front of the lot. So in other words, you're not going to see a sea of parking and a sea of parking and a sea of parking. There's going to be a limit as to how wide they could be along the roadway. And no parking is provided within the front setback. They do talk about site access and circulation. No more than 2 driveways. Sidewalks and pathways should connect together. Look out for visibility at intersections, especially with housing or structures being closer to the road if needed. And the architectural design standards, these are consistent with the historic rehabilitation guidelines for the village of Thompsonville. And essentially with new construction, they want you to reflect the patterns of and rhythms of the historic streetscape, maintain historic setbacks, conform to the prevailing scale, form, and massing of the streetscape, and of course include architectural elements that are similar in nature to the neighborhood. And new commercial construction, again, prevailing height and scale of the existing historic streetscape should be maintained, and architectural features should be added, and new infill and construction should also conform to the scale and mode of the structures along the road. So that diagram over there where it says no, you don't want the new building back so far from others. You want to at least maintain that streetscape. Going on to the next page, number 4, architectural details characteristic of the particular style and period proposed should be incorporated into the design for any new construction and should relate harmoniously to adjacent buildings. So they really are trying to maintain the historic architecture throughout Thompsonville. And that goes on with the same types of features with remodeling and or rehabilitation, trying to get that historic architectural character to be preserved. Going on to the next page, please. New additions and exterior alterations should, certainly match the style of the building. They should not be very visible. Preferably, they should be put on the rear or the sides, and compatible with the scale and proportions of the existing building. And again, building massing, they want the primary structure to be up front, and they, if you have a blank wall, you should not have it greater than 40 feet in length, shall not be visible from the streets. And if it's more than 5,000 square feet, they want you to include some articulation, something that breaks up that mass. Section 6.9, open space requirements. Essentially, anything that is new will be required to provide 2% of the gross floor area in open space. This is mostly going to be walkways, little parklets, little plazas, lighting, fountains, sculptures, things of that nature. So it's something to invite the citizens outside and enjoy the outside. Okay, and landscape standards basically require if the area is not used for some other structure or parking or something, it should be landscaped, whether it be just grass or trees or bushes. They are promoting native species. Low impact development is promoted with stormwater techniques and perhaps rain gardens. And it will require 1 deciduous canopy tree per 50 feet of frontage. And there's one other thing I wanted to say about that. Oh, yeah. And on the next page, a minimum of 1 tree shall be provided per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So trees will be required with basically every 1,000 square feet. Lighting standards, section 6.11, pedestrian scale and designed to provide both safety and travel and ambiance. It should be 10 to 14 feet maximum height for the poles and supplied by underground wires. And it should be full cutoff lighting. And fences, no more than 6 feet in height in the Gateway 2 and 4 feet in height in any front yard. They are looking for more aesthetic fences, I guess. The stockade rail and industrial chain link fence can be used, but it should be used more in the back and the side yards. And I suggested that to the commission right before this, and this is something that this is kind of given already, but non-conforming uses. I just wanted to say in the regulations that any non-conforming use or structure in existence at time of adoption of these regulations shall be grandfathered. So they're not going to be, you don't have to take them down, you don't have to worry about them, they're going to be okay. So those are the regulations. There'll be some added financial components interspersed with these when we get the final document for October 13th to go to Office of Policy and Management. I'm sorry, I'm probably not up here. Is there any questions from the commission at this point?
Anything from the commission? Okay, no, I'll have the sign-up sheets, or start with those.
Got a little maze back there.
Thanks. Okay. Marty Levitz first.
My name is Marty Levitz. I'm at 869 Farmington Avenue in West Hartford, Connecticut. I was looking through the various gateway designations, and we have a piece of land that lies in Gateway 4. And looking at Gateway 4, it raises some interesting questions for us. Number one, we have a bulk lot that runs from the railroad to the river, and 800 at a length of 811 feet. There is no way we can comply with frontages unless we either build a road or donate a road or something. Then if we do that, we've got some, if we put 40-foot lots in, there's no way we can put in lots that are going to be less than 150 feet to 240 feet deep, which is which shows an area of much greater than anything that's on your listing with minimum lot sizes. And I would call to your attention that our land abuts the property of Northeast Utilities, where at some point the transit station is going to be located, and by the state did designate our property as transit-oriented developed property. But with the restrictions of Rivergate 4, we can't really conform to what the state is saying our property should be. So, and I do still have trouble with having to put in a walkway, an 800-foot walkway on the river. That I've noticed in your documents that it says that it has to be built, maintained, and insured by the landowner. And this is, if you go with a minimum size of 10 feet by 800 feet, it's a pretty expensive walkway. So I'm not sure, and then assuming the liability of that doesn't seem reasonable. So I would like two things. If we insist upon a Gateway 4 regulation, which has everything in it that's on the list here, that you research either taking some of the land or taking the responsibility of some of the land. But as far as the state is concerned, the state feels that this is transit-oriented developed property. And I would request that you review what you're doing with this property, making it single-family houses.
I thought we took care of that at the hearings.
Sorry?
I thought we took care of that at the hearings with his lots.
Not according to this.
No, I know, I thought we had.
Because this area is in a Connecticut River Conservation Zone, so, when I look at, the requirements of something that is in a Connecticut Connecticut River Conservation Zone, basically it says that, it starts off with, I guess a 25,000 lot size is a minimum size. And then it goes up to, an R44. So, I think there has to be some work that needs to be done in a Rivergate 4 zone, and I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there is a lot of contradictory things that are going on and a lot of exceptions that are being indicated in that Rivergate 4 in order to satisfy some issues that are proposed in our regulations, but I think that we are going to be discussing them at a later date.
What year are you talking about with the Connecticut River Conservation Zone?
It's actually in our regulations in terms of, I think it's in Article 8.
Yeah, it's section 8.50 in the zoning regs.
You call it the Connecticut River Conservation Zone, as if it's something
That's what it is
that's
presently.
dictated by the state of Connecticut. And we call to your attention that there was a restriction on building in a conservation zone, but in October of 2014, that conservation zone was dissolved by the state of Connecticut. So if you have a conservation zone, the only conservation zones I'm aware of with riverfront restrictions exist in the 7 towns located at the mouth of the Connecticut River that are affected by titles, not anything north of Chester, I believe it is. So I would like to know where in the state of Connecticut regulations you can have a conservation zone.
Well, that is part of our regulations right now, so I'm just indicating to you what is in our regulations.
What is what?
Article 8.50.
8.50.
8.15. 50? 50. Yeah.
And that was instituted in what year?
Our zoning regulations cover several years. They haven't been really updated. So I don't know if they can give you the answer to that.
I'm just saying that it is part of our regulations at this time, and until we modify them, it's part of our regulations. And
Okay, once again, I would encourage the commission, the planning commission, to relook at transit-oriented development, what the state is trying to accomplish with their $740 million building the Hartford Line Rail, what they expect in this area, and also a little bit on the fact that the town of Enfield took money from the state of Connecticut, from CROG, to do environmental studies along the railroad tracks where they said that these properties lie in a transit-oriented development zone. So I would be a little careful in how you're going to explain all these things away.
Lori?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, may I speak?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Levitz, I hope we can make you happy tonight because that walkway that you were referring to is out. That is no longer in the regulations. So that's...
I'm sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing.
Oh, you were concerned about the walkway?
Yeah.
We've taken that out of the regulations.
Oh,
because
okay.
over private property.
I picked up a copy yesterday, and it said that, or the day before yesterday, and it said in there that the walkway has to be maintained by the landowner.
No, perhaps you got an older copy, but we did take that out before we sent this out.
Okay.
So hopefully that makes you happy. And you are correct in that the state did do away with their Connecticut River Conservation Commission. It was, I think, it was
October
around.
of 2014.
You're right. But the town of Enfield has their own conservation area for the river. So it's in the zoning regulations, and it's just basically preservation, similarly, that the state was trying to get. It's just that a lot of towns were duplicating their efforts, and that's why they disbanded.
Okay.
So-
I should make an appointment with you to sit down and talk about what we
Absolutely.
can do in the conservation zone.
Absolutely.
Can
That
you
would be
build in the
fabulous.
conservation zone?
Yes, you can. It's just
Okay.
going to be a little bit more limited. So, and we'll need to figure out what takes precedence over this. So whether it's a conservation zone over the River Gateway or the River Gateway over the conservation.
Or a landowner's rights?
Or a landowner's rights.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
We do have something that covers all of them.
Right,
And it's called the Fifth Amendment,
right.
so
Okay.
be careful with that, too.
One other thing that you've mentioned was the state TOD. So actually, the state gave the town money to do this study. So,
I know, because I was a recipient of some of that money to do
Right, so-
an environmental study.
so I think that the state is well aware that we are working on these regulations as well as doing brownfield development. And so I think that hopefully we're working together hand in hand on that.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
William and Jean Knoll.
I'm sorry. One more clarification. You were worried about the 4,000 square foot lots. That's a minimum, not a maximum. So,
Aware of that. In order for me to maximize the return on my property, though, I would be making 40 lots on that property.
okay. I guess I'm not understanding how that's. Are you worried about putting in a road then?
Well, a road is going to have to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Can you come back up to the mic
Yeah,
just
come
so that
back
we
up
can
to the
pick you up?
microphone if you're going to.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think that we're here to design
Yeah.
somebody's land.
Yeah,
You know, I think
you're
here
right.
we're
I
just.
think we should have a
we're here just
conversation
to talk
out of
about
this.
what our regulations are in terms of we're
Right.
not here
Yeah.
to design somebody's
Right.
She's
property.
invited you to her office to discuss
Yeah.
this. You have
Okay.
a particular piece of property down there anyhow. We're aware of that. You're caught between the river and the railroad.
Yeah,
Well, that's going to be her responsibility and her job to sort of help you out. I mean, and we're here to do that too,
yeah.
but we can't
Technically, I
design
have
it tonight.
16 feet of frontage on a road, because the town road is a 16-foot road.
Right.
That comes up to short of my property.
There's an old
and
dirt road
stops.
on the other side.
Yeah.
Where,
Anything north of that was a railroad siding, for those of you who remember
Right.
the powerhouse taking in hopper cars, and
But
they
Marty,
dumped the
you
coal.
need to
Yeah.
discuss it with her, and we can't
Yeah.
design it for you
Yeah,
tonight.
well, we'd be very happy to meet with you outside of the meeting.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Am I going to have to get up again? Okay, thank you.
William and Jean Knoll, do you want to talk? I know it's crossed out, but maybe you change your mind. Okay. Kevin Piemonte, you want to talk? Or your name is crossed out, but I'll pass. Okay. And Dave Reed? I'll pass. Okay. Pat Gaskell?
Could you please repeat the name?
Yeah. Pat Gaskell, 94 South River Street. I just want to start off by thanking everyone or taking the time tonight to have a meeting, for the voices and the concerns of the residents of the zoning areas that you're going to be changing. I have some questions that were brought up while you guys were talking. This is really the first time I've seen this, the red new proposals, the changes. When did this happen? And this kind of concerns me because these changes, I mean, I was going to these workshops and I've been watching the meetings, and it makes me nervous that these changes just pop in. They just happen without a meeting. So the public's not informed of what's going on. And I think that's what the residents are worried about in these areas, that we're not informed. It's terrible. It's
Sir, we have the internet where the town.
I know, but when did this happen? When did these changes
I could
happen?
answer that.
It actually started in February. We started our hearings or
No.
meetings in
I've
February.
I'm talking about the red.
I could answer that.
Yeah.
I did that this morning, so it would be on one sheet. The red is, if you look at the top line, it says, the red below indicates proposed uses in general, informational only, not to be incorporated. It was just for ease of reading, just.
So
that's
the
all.
red, so
there's not
on
going-
the sheet that was
It's-
handed out.
It's not going, the red part will not be in the regulations. It's just for clarification, for ease.
There's some really major points that are in here that it's kind of deceiving. I mean, the red. Does the commission agree with these things? Have you guys seen this? Have you read it
What are you referring
through?
to now? The red,
The
They
red
were
parts
taken-
that we were giving out. I can give you one.
They
right
were
here,
taken
Charlie.
from the descriptions of the gateways.
Well, has the commission even seen them before you handed them out to the public? That's what I'm confused by.
It's,
these are only
Because I've been
directions for
going
the
to the-
public, so that you try to understand the regulations.
the red is just listing in general what the permitted uses are in each one, and the permitted uses are listed and located in the regulations.
Okay, so these on the back of this are all inside the
Yes,
regulations there?
absolutely.
Okay, all right.
It was just to try to put it on one sheet for ease.
In the commission, well, I just want to make sure the commission, because that's what I'm saying, the face of the commission is part of what's going on here with the zoning. We have to trust you of what's going on with the zoning. And it's difficult, when you see changes, any kind of changes that are given out. But, let me move on here. I have questions about the River Gateway 3. As you see on the map, the one on Prospect Street, it's a commercial area right now. It's zoned, it's all commercial. It's Kelly Fredette's, and it's the dry ice manufacturers in the back there. And you have a proposal of the River Gateway 3, a walkable residential neighborhood with diversity of housing choices. I'm just having the question of why Kelly Fredette and that business was incorporated in that River Gateway.
If I remember some of our workshops correctly, that's in the future. 100 years from now, if Kelly Fredette goes away. Use your mic. Sorry. If it was for the future, 100 years from now, Kelly Fredette probably won't be in business, and the dry ice people probably won't be in business. That way, instead of getting industrial like a rendering plant or something, you can put houses in. Or you can keep the same use, but you can't expand the use.
Okay.
This was quite a discussion among the group at that particular hearing for this change. But I believe also was that vehicles have to travel through and make turns that are very difficult for the trucks and so on and so forth. And as she says, for the future, you perhaps don't want the tractor trailers and delivery trucks and so on and so forth going down there.
Right.
It's very difficult for them to manipulate through those narrow streets. And I guess the public also doesn't appreciate the traffic for that. So we figured maybe the commercial isn't going to want to go down there.
Yeah.
Also, times have changed because I think the access at the southern end was changed when the bridge and all that roadway went in there. You can't get down from that end of the
Well, I understand that. I
The
understand.
other part
I
of
was
that
just-
is, the very last line in the thing here says, any non-conforming use or structure in existence at the time of adoption of these regulations should be grandfathered. So as long as they want to be there, they'll be there.
I understand that. I understand that. I just wondered why just that one section.
Well,
Just why.
Future use.
you have to put.
Why not do the whole section? Why not do the whole Rivergate too? Then you have the whole option of everywhere, right?
Well, the other
What if,
is
what if,
already
what if
residential.
everybody, the buildings in 100 years burn down, all of them? I mean, then what? Then you have to conform to that one regulation? I'm just wondering why.
But one of the reasons was that
Yes. Sure, yeah, go ahead. Yep, okay.
My concern, along with yours, is 100 years from now, suppose one of the Kelly Fredette barns burns down next year. Is it going to be allowed to be rebuilt?
Yes,
Yes.
because it's already there.
Yep,
Legal non-conforming.
Okay.
because again, and another reason why
okay, good.
is that we were looking for parcels that were relatively large so that it would allow for the opportunity for some high density residential construction. And obviously if there's a lot of little lots, you'd have to consolidate a lot of little lots. But if there's one big lot that allows itself to be utilized for a higher density storage, and I mean I keep saying storage in terms of residential construction, that it would be more conducive to somebody coming along and developing that area rather than trying to buy all these little lots and pieces and try to put it together. So that by having
There's a
the
lot.
larger parcels allows it to be utilized in a higher density and a more effective and economical way.
But why only that little section is my
Because there's
question.
no large lots like that anywhere else. That's the only area that right now exists with those relatively large lots.
All right. Okay. My next one is the River Gateway 1, when it got changed from River Gateway 2 to 1, that's along the South River Street. What was the reason for changing that, the River Gateway 2? It's South River Street. It's south of River Gateway 4. The green right below
Changed
the,
from what?
if you're looking on the map,
Yeah, I know, but what, it was two, okay.
it was 2, and then I was at that meeting when it got changed. It was, that was a late meeting. And it was like 2 minutes, it got changed, and then that was the end of the meeting.
I think, according to my recollection, is that it got changed because of the fact that we wanted to preserve it, potentially for open space and not have significant development there, so that anything that was there right now could stay there forever and ever and ever. And as times change and possibly, as if the town wanted to, absorb some properties that are there for sale and consolidate them as open space over a long period of time, then it would allow the town to do that.
But why just, that section? I mean, you didn't do that in River Gateway 4.
You got,
Again, we're still
Same
talking
concept.
about River Gateway 4 too, in terms of, I think that there could
you
be some
also have,
discussion on that.
up at the northern end of the town, you also have Rivergate one there, which is also along the river, as you know.
Right. And I just don't agree with the open space in a residential area. And again, I know I came to the meeting, planning and zoning meeting, and I stated, Region 1, EPA, New England. Now, this is the EPA. What is open space? Green space. Open space is any piece of land that is undeveloped, has no buildings or other built structures, and is accessible to the public. Open space can include green space, land that is partially or completely covered with grass, trees, shrubs, or other vegetation. Green space includes parks, communities, gardens, cemeteries, schoolyards, playgrounds, public seating areas, public plazas, vacant lots. Nowhere does it say residence properties. That's what I don't understand. I don't understand the reason for it.
Go ahead.
So my concern with this also would be is what you're saying, Rich, is if the town were to want the opportunity to buy up these parcels and assemble them for a larger parcel, why do we need to change zoning to do that? The town can buy any land it wants at any time at a fair market value from a resident and not deem their property worthless, because you're saying 100 years from now, but at some point, a homeowner who owns a home there, whether it's dilapidated 100 years from now or not, if it's deemed open space, they're going to take a loss on the value.
It's a loss.
But
It sure is.
But it's really not open space in terms of, if you look at the definition of the entire Rivergate 1 area, it says municipal open space, riverfront natural resource lands for public use. In terms of, it's, again, more than just open space. There's other things that are allowed to be in there. And the fact that, again, we have that last clause that says, if there is residential there and, at the time of, the regulation change, then that residential land and usage has, can stay there for as long as it wants to stay there. It doesn't necessarily ever have to change.
Well, if that was the thought process, then why don't we make the whole thing open space?
Okay, Rich, since
that's-
you
that's
like
where I'm-
jumping in, I'm going to jump in here too. The farmers, when we got all the snow years back, their farms collapsed. And if they didn't rebuild them within 1 year, this town refused to allow them to be rebuilt because they were too close to the road. But they were grandfathered in then. But because they didn't rebuild in 1 year for whatever reason, they are no longer able to rebuild. They're still collapsed throughout the town. And that's where I get nervous with situations like this. This gentleman's property burns to the ground, and he has to fight with his insurance company for over a year, or whatever reason he can't replace his house. Is the town going to do the same thing? Because you know what his land's worth after the year? Nothing. If it's deemed open space, I look at this, the town of Enfield has the right to purchase any property for fair market value. And at that point, they can say, okay, we're going to turn it back over to private use, but we're putting an easement through it so people can walk along the river. You can't make the residents allow people to walk through their property.
No,
That
right,
is,
that's-
I understand that. And I know you guys are working on it. But these people are upset because you're saying, well, we haven't gotten there yet. We haven't discussed that yet. We haven't done this yet. Changes are being made that they're just being made aware of right now, and I would be upset with it too. And I want to start voicing my concerns because I agree with a lot of what the people are concerned about, and it's private property. And until the town of Enfield purchases that property and makes a change in the title, and then turns it back over to private, we don't have the authority to say who can go on that property and when. We don't have the authority to say he's got to put an 800-foot river walk in, even though it was taken out, okay? And that's where I'm gonna have a lot of concerns with this. So instead of saying we haven't gotten there yet, because now you're leaving me in the dark, you're also leaving them in the dark. We need to come up with more answers, because this is sounding more like, well, we had to pass it to read what's in it. And we all know what I'm talking about there. So I'm not going to pass anything that I don't know what's in it, and they're not going to support it. So there's a lot of questions here that need answers, and we're not getting them. You're just pushing them off. Well, we haven't gotten there yet. They're asking the questions.
And again, I don't think that anybody's saying that the town is going to buy anybody's land, and nobody's saying
we
that
don't need that.
the town is going to, force people to have walkways through them. We've already discussed that we are not requiring any kind of walkways along the river. And the only way that we could have a walkway along the river is if the town controls the land. So the only possible way that the town can control the land is that, realistically, it has to somehow be proportioned for the future use, that the future use, the long-term intended possible use could be open space. And any land that's along a river, I would expect that one would want to try to preserve as much open space along a river, especially in the town of Enfield, where we have no access to the river anywhere except at boat launch areas.
Can't take care of.
Again, please.
You know, but what I'm saying is that, you know, what happens is we are a planning department, and by planning, you have to look for the future. If you don't look for the future, you're never going to get to the future. But, you know, if you have at least a vision as to what you might want to expect that, you know, the future generations could build upon, is that you have to start making baby steps now. And we're not taking anybody's land. We're not trying to rezone it. It's still going to be residential land as long as it's residential land. And I can't conceive that the town of Enfield isn't going to allow somebody to rebuild their house if they have a fire and they're having difficulties working with their insurance. I'm sure that, you know, that's kind of an extreme, you know, situation that the town of Enfield is going to turn a blind eye to that. You know, I would have to think that, you know, the town of Enfield is better than that. So, but
Tell the farmers that, Rich.
All right, let's
I can't control what the town of Enfield does. But
discuss this later.
I just want to make one point to Kenny. We just changed that ordinance about a year and a half ago. It's no longer 1 year. It's
Okay.
a couple of years or 3 years now.
Because you see the result that happened out
Well,
throughout the town.
not for the farms,
But-
it happened in town.
But so
it's
so
been
I can
changed.
finish, Charlie, real quick. The Conservation Commission wants to do the Scannick River Walkway, the Greenway. They're going about it the right way. They're purchasing the property from the private developers, and then they're making their own regulations on that property. That's the way to do it. But for a privately owned piece of land, changing the zonings to try to manipulate it so the town has control, it's not fair to the private resident. I mean, when he puts his house up for sale, it's open for anybody to buy. If the town wants to put a 50-foot right-of-way along the river, buy the property, put the right-of-way in it, then turn around and sell the property again privately. And now now that will follow the deed forever. Nobody can ever take
It's not
that.
a requirement for any sidewalk along the river.
No, I'm just saying, they want a walkway down the river, so everybody can enjoy the river, like Rich just said. Well,
they
that's
want
great to the
access,
people
right.
who don't own along the river. But the people who do own along the river, that's not fair to allow somebody to walk across their property.
we're not saying that we want somebody to walk along their property.
Lori speak, and let's.
Just a point of clarification when we're talking about section 6.9 open space requirements. This is not open space like it is with a subdivision. This is basically for anything with 10,000 square feet of gross floor area. So you're talking about a multi-use, higher density use, higher density dwelling unit building. So this is just the green space, or the space between the buildings, is just supposed to be open to the public or the residents, so they could sit outside, have a little path. That's really what this is getting at. It's not open space that's going to be a taking from, you know, the town's not going to own it, and it's going to be enjoyed by the residents and pedestrians alike.
There's
See,
a big
one of the-
difference
yeah.
between residents and the public. Bigelow, if some private person wants to go in there and play tennis on the tennis courts and run it for the day, Bigelow's going to have a problem with it. You're not a resident of that building. If somebody builds this huge condominium complex along the river and they have swimming pools and tennis courts and stuff like that, the public is not allowed in there. It's private property. And
Right.
until it's changed from public or residents, you can't allow the public to go on private property, and you can't force. Well, that's what they're saying. That's what
She just stated that
She
for
just
public
read
use.
that.
Read it again, Lori, please. For public use.
It's for publicly
Or
accessible
residents.
open space.
Thank you.
So it is written for residents and pedestrians. So this is similar to, if anybody's been to New York City, if you've ever been to Rockefeller Center and you've seen the front, the big Atlas thing, that's public art. That is public space. That is their private property, and they were required to put that in for the public. This is similar to that, but obviously
And that's what makes me nervous about the open space, because it can be taken for the public. My property, private property, can be taken for the public. And everybody
Yeah, but you're
else
not
is
the
right down the
developer,
line.
you're not a developer.
And everybody else is on the Connecticut River in Enfield. So that's what I'm really concerned about. Now, I understand focusing on the millennials, but you have to consider the taxpayers and the property owners that have concerns right now about the zoning changes that affects them presently, right now. You have to remember that. We have to live here. We're living here. We don't want to move, and it feels like we're being forced to move out, and I don't want to be forced to move out of Enfield. I have a lot of roots in Enfield for a long time, right here in Bigelow. I don't want to move, but I feel like it's a pressure, to sell out, to get out, to move on, and I don't feel it should be like that. I really don't. But thank you again for listening.
well, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Who's this? Help me. Peg? Or what is that?
Jay? Is it Jay?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jay Stradinger. I'm a recent acquisition of Enfield. We've been a corporate transfer from every place else. I'm an engineer at UTC. We recently bought at 35 North River. We've lived there 4 years. I think we've been in the area 5 years. We like it here. We're starting to put down roots, and we are somewhat concerned in the extreme about the zoning changes and the meaning of public access. There are issues of liability and security that we are quite concerned about. That if one or both of us, well, if my wife and I are both traveling, then, it's just stuff, right, if anything happens. But often one or the other is home alone, and there are a lot of indigents that come by. We have a lot of traffic that's undesirable. Making this public access exacerbates that that problem, the current problem that we have, and I don't see that keeping it public access or making it even more is going to improve that. So we would prefer that this stayed as residential. As a taxpayer, that's what my preference is, that this stays residential and not municipal public access. So I think that would be a Zone 2 or reclassified in North and South River as
One of these, yeah. 'Cause of gas
Zone 2
companies.
or Gateway 2. Is that how that works? Right. You mentioned and thank you, Lori, for talking to us at the conservation meeting. It was very enlightening. Good to meet you. You mentioned something about grandfathered in. Would that language be in writing? That if this were to go municipal, that this would be in writing, that would be
State law.
grandfathered in for residential? Which would give us relief on liability as well? Is that how that works?
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yeah.
speak? Realistically, that would be law anyway, but I was proposing to put it in writing in the regulation, so it is very clear to everybody that, yes, it would be grandfathered.
I mean, as a primary focus, we prefer to be residential, but if that is not possible and we're forced to go municipal in our zoning, then we would,
Where they were.
You won't ever
asked
have
for.
to, you don't ever have to be
33.
municipal. All that says is that municipal uses are permitted. It doesn't say that you must become a municipal use.
okay.
And actually, do you want to clarify the open space?
Yes.
Jen's got a
Okay.
good clarification here.
So as I'm looking through this, I know that the description for River Gateway 1 says it includes municipal uses and open space uses. That does not mean that River Gateway 1 has to abide by that open space section of the regulations and provide open space for the public in that section. That is for buildings of 10,000 square feet or more. That's not even something that would be really even allowed in River Gateway 1, because the use tables show exactly like open space, but not necessarily publicly accessible open space. We're not asking anybody, any private dwelling, to offer public access to their property in that zone.
Even though it's allowed.
Well, yeah.
So
That's
which
if
forces
somebody
me to put
buys
up
your
no
property.
my apologies. Say.
What she's saying, if somebody wishes to buy your property and
Yes.
perhaps the neighbors, then they would have to abide by that regulation, no?
No.
No, so if you look at the use tables for River Gateway 1, actually single-family homes are still allowed. And what you can do also there is, if like someone wants to buy your property, someone else's property, combine them and make a park, they could do that.
That's what I just said.
Or like the town could buy the property and put in a park, or whatever other municipal thing that we might need as for the town. But we wouldn't be asking anybody to,
It just means it's allowed there.
yeah.
Yes.
We would be asking
Yes.
anybody to provide that.
So it's not the changes in the zoning is not saying or forcing anybody to sell their property or to get out or to move. It's basically, and you said River Gateway 4 is where you're at?
We're in one.
You're in one? So
yeah.
single family residential, you know. The thing
So-
about it is when it comes down to, let's see, to one, double checking here, that nobody's saying you need to sell your land, you need to move on, you need to do this. None of that is what this is about. What it's about is the fact that down the road, if people decide to sell their properties, then, you know, there's other uses that can be used with those properties. And it's not a matter of anybody trying to force anybody or say you need to sell out or we want you to leave, we want you gone. What we want is to be able to provide, in some ways, in the future, possible access to the river. Not go on people's private property. Not, you know, people still own their property. It's still theirs. And
So would that limit who my potential buyers would be?
no.
So I could still sell this grandfather
It
clause
expands.
to some other residential.
If it was still a residential use, yes, you can sell it.
The
And
use-
The next
the
person
use
would
stays
assume
with the
that.
property
The use
until you
stays-
change.
As it said, it's grandfathered, it
Yep.
stays there. Unless somebody comes in, then they're allowed
To
to
change.
go to the regulations and see, what can I put there? And the regulations state, and
Okay.
A through C
Yeah.
or whatever.
This is for future building and not
Yes.
existing
Absolutely.
building.
Yes, exactly. It's just options. It's
Because the other thing I might add is that by putting it in Rivergate 1, it allows for one-family houses. If it was in Rivergate 2, it allows for up to a four-family house. So basically, you could have a residential house sitting there, and if the next guy comes along, and if your neighbor has a large enough lot, where if somebody bought that house and he knocked that house down, he could put a four-family house there. And all of a sudden, you would have a multi-family house next to your single-family house. So in reality, it's actually protection for you where somebody can't buy an adjacent lot that might be oversized and actually develop it in a more higher density. So, I think that, there's you have to read the entire regulation. You just can't read words without looking at all the different implications that are there. So in that sense, we're actually protecting you from somebody else building something of higher density because of the fact that we only allow a single-family residence along that line. So, it's hard to explain all the little nuances that are there, and possibly, you might not get that we're actually looking after your interest rather than, we never want, nobody can force anybody to give up their land or to allow somebody to use their land that they don't want to use that, and that always goes without saying. So, in that sense, I think that, we're really trying to protect you, not downgrade you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So just one more point of clarification, I hope. Let's say there's a vacant lot in River Gateway 1 and you want to put up a house. You can. You may put up a single-family house. There is no open space requirement. It's just a house. but it's a single-family house. The single-family residences are protected under this regulation. You are allowed to maintain it, build it new, add to it, put a deck on. So you should not be concerned about that. And the open space will not be relevant to the single-family homes. It's really geared towards those apartment houses, essentially.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, where am I?
That's the list.
Dave Frederick.
He's here to learn, that's all.
Oh, are you?
Did you?
Yeah, I won't ask. As a former teacher, you're learning now, huh? Earlene Provencher.
Yeah, that's why I brought this.
I know I should have brought one.
Good evening. Earlene Provencher. I live in 94 South River Street. I've been a resident of Thompsonville for over 50 years. I'm very proud. My husband was in Thompsonville, his family, for over 100 years. And my house has been on South River Street that we lived in with the family. So I have it written in the cement that my husband's grandfather wrote in 1928 in the cellar. I want you to know we're all wearing these shirts tonight because we are all homeowners, taxpayers of Thompsonville. Our roots are in Thompsonville. And I could say that we are taxpayers of Thompsonville and we are homeowners of Thompsonville. I had a lot of notes all over the place, so I don't know what I'm going to be talking about, but I'll try to, as I think of them. The first thing you were talking about, this 100-year plan for zoning. Pat Gaskell spoke about the Rivergate, I think it was River Gateway 3, that little partial, and you kept saying it's for a 100-year plan, 100-year plan. Well, I've been in Thompsonville for 50 years, and when I first moved in, we were zoned as R17. Then it was zoned as R33. Now it's zoning in River Gateway. And you keep talking about this 100-year zoning. I mean, you can change the zoning anytime you want, and that's why I'm a little confused. You're talking about this 100-year plan. In fact, even before the R17, my property was zoned as farm.
If I can, that was a figure of speech. It just meant that they're
Well-
planning ahead for
Okay.
possible future use. And you're
All
right,
right.
the zone could be changed. If
You're talking about single-family residences? And you were talking that's to protect us instead of having a two-family move in or a four-family? I'll tell you right now, I'd rather have a two-family or four-family instead of a park with all the people coming down trespassing next to my property. I agree with the majority of people here on open space. I do not like that open space. It's prohibiting me to add a two-car garage that I might want to have an in-law apartment above my garage because it's a single-family zone. I won't be able to do any increases on my property. And how are the four-family and the two-family houses, how are they going to be on South River Street right now? Are they grandfathered in as four-family and two-family? So you're really limiting me in what I can do on my property with building a garage on open space? I'm a little bit confused. I need clarification on that.
Because she would be expanding the use.
Yeah, but the things are grandfathered. She can do.
A new garage.
It would be expanding the use.
the single family is not non-conforming. It is conforming, and it is allowed. And as I said, decks, sheds, garages, additions are permitted.
Absolutely, as long as.
There
they've
is
got
no
the
open
setbacks
space
and everything
requirement.
else.
Right, that's what she's asking.
You're
that-
right.
So I'm saying that if I build a garage with an in-law apartment above, I would be allowed to do that without,
If it's
Maybe
in the
not with
zoning
apartments above.
regulations, you know.
It would have to be connected to your house in terms of then you would have two residences on one lot that were separated. As long as they're an integral residence, you
and they're
could,
connected?
yeah, they would have to be an integral part of one house to have an in-law apartment.
Okay, so you're saying that if I make my house into a two-family right now, I would be able to do that?
Well, not a two-family.
I want to build an in-law apartment
Yeah,
up
you can
above.
build an in-law apartment onto your property, onto your house right now. It cannot be separated. It has to be an integral part of your house.
So then I can build
Yes,
an
you-
apartment up above?
Yes, you can do whatever you want. Again, all the uses in all the other parts of town would still be allowed in your part of town. Any other, potential use or improvement that could be made anywhere else in town for a single residential unit, you could still do the same thing. So, you are on the same page and the same line as all the other one-family houses throughout the town of Enfield.
Well,
so
I
There are
think
regulations
I
in
think-
here on in-law apartments. They're separate regulations than what you have here. They're in the zoning.
Well, I might
regulations.
decide to have a daughter-in-law apartment instead of an in-law apartment. Would that still be
Again,
allowed?
there are regulations for that.
I think the confusion lies in the fact that we're revising the zoning regulations and the zoning map. Anything that's allowed like for R33, you can have an in-law apartment, or when they say in-law, they mean anything blood related, so your daughter would be fine. But there's certain conditions that have to be met. So if you're R33, it has to be so many square feet. I'm oversimplifying, so if I'm confusing you, I apologize. But I'm saying to you that it doesn't matter if you're R1, as long as you're a single family in an allowable district and you meet the criteria, you can have an accessory apartment attached, like upstairs.
Okay, I mean, I'm just totally confused because you can do this, you can't do that, and then the
Well,
way it's
no,
reading,
no,
it says
no.
that's open space. I have notes all over the place here, and I can't. I'm totally lost because there's so much to talk about. But I want to thank you. Ken Nelson, thank you very much for your concerns with the residents.
I want you to relax and ask the questions you want to ask. I know right now you're getting a little frustrated, your notes, because we're all taking in a lot. And
I
there's
am.
a lot of questions people have,
I
and
have
I
a
don't
lot of
think they're
notes.
getting the answers
Okay.
to where somebody can understand them.
Well, that's it.
You know,
you have
even
until
myself,
about
I
10
sit
o'clock?
here and I listen to some of the answers, and I'm not buying them either. So, if you want me to help you, I'll help you, and I'm going to
Okay.
help this planning commission, and we're
Okay.
all going to work it out together.
Well,
but
some
we
of these-
all need to ask the question.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Some of these have already been answered, but before I go any further, in the beginning of this meeting, you said that you received a letter from Steve Catella.
Right.
I think it would be very interesting if that was read to the public instead of just sticking it in your notes saying attach it to the minutes. Is it too long that you wouldn't be able to read
Oh,
that?
it isn't, but,
I could-
well, it's addressed, is it, I guess.
I mean, you can read it after I'm finished with my notes.
Well, no, I guess I would have the right to read it. Well, it's all right, yeah, no problem in it.
Do you want me to read it into the minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. It is dated August 6, 2018, to the Enfield Planning and Zoning Commission.
That's
Dear
part
members
the
of the
problem.
commission, regarding concerns I have about the proposed River Gateway zoning regulations, I've been consulting with Attorney Brantz from the law firm Halloran and Sage. Previously, he provided the commission with suggestions about allowable uses along River Gateway 4 at the workshops. The commission and consultant considered some of the uses proposed and included them in a final draft document. He again makes further recommended uses for the commission to consider prior to the adoption of these regulations. More importantly, I call the commission's attention to section 6.3.1, which is the easement requirement, in River Gateway 4 of the proposed regulations. Research by Attorney Brantz has unequivocally concluded the easement requirement being proposed is illegal. This is supported by federal and state case law, and a copy of the complete analysis of these cases have been provided to the town attorney for review. I am confident the town attorney will concur with Attorney Brantz regarding the illegality of section 6.3.1. Therefore, omitting the section from the proposed regulations will be required to comply with federal and state law. Please advise me when action is taken to remedy the situation. Sincerely, Steve Cogtella. And then there is an attachment from Halloran and Sage, Attorney Mark Brantz, and I could read the whole thing, but essentially he says that the easement is illegal, and I completely concur with that. We have no right to just take people's property.
Thank you.
Taken out.
So we've taken that out. The other things that they would like to have changed, in short, are, I'll just read this one paragraph. First, let me address uses because while the list has been expanded, there are some uses missing that are hard to explain or justify. Adult/child daycare facility is a use typically allowed by special permit in both residential and commercial zones, and that could be a good fit for your property due to its river view. So he's talking about Steve's property. Same for public-private schools. Assisted living, community residences, congregate housing, housing for the elderly, and senior residential developments are all use groups that are on the rise due to the aging baby boomers that would value the river view and that would be compatible in mixed-use residential, commercial, recreational zone. So they're essentially saying that those items should be included in the River Gateway 1. So, I mean, and then there's a lot of legalese and case law that they reference in here. And certainly, if anybody wants a copy of this or
Thank you,
look
Laurie.
at this, you're certainly welcome to it.
Thank you. I'm going through my notes. I know that you answered a lot of them. Probably not the way that we wanted to hear it, but you did answer it. My first question is, what is the reason for the rezoning River Gateway 1 to open space when it was River Gateway 2 minutes before your final meeting on June 29th? And contradictions, definition of open space, designating open space with a high-density district. Explain, I'm confused with that. New zoning will limit homeowner usage and expand some of the problems we already have down in Thompsonville in our area. What is meant by municipal open space for public use? Timeline of events point to rezoning of private land to make way for private developers. Want to maintain historic patterns of development on South River Street. We do not want restrictions placed on our private property. Rezoning for open space does not equate to redevelopment. How will this rezoning affect taxable property? How will this rezoning affect our ability to use our land, building, farming? It feels as if our property rights are infringed upon. This rezoning seems awful sudden, with the purpose not clearly explained. And I had a question as the research for this change. What is happening on Prospect Street with this ribbon cutting? Feel discriminated against as an invested homeowner to benefit a developer under the guise of revitalization? We have high use of drug use, theft, loitering, blight in this area. To think that expanding municipal use without remedy is illogical and irresponsible. You're putting the cart before the horse. I need someone to explain exactly how changing a zone residential property to open space, which according to the EPA is property without existing structure, is sensible or even permissible. We want zoning that was in place 2 minutes prior to the close of the June 29th workshop that ended abruptly as people were walking out the door. This is too sudden and it's too clear. And I know that this was not brought up tonight, but a lot of time you go to these meetings and you always say, everybody says it's not in my backyard. But you have to remember, the difference is we are not talking about our backyard. We are talking our yard. It's our backyard that is being negotiated, not someone else's backyard. That's just about it. And I had something else on the bottom here, but that was already taken care of. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Please, we thank her and we thank you for being here, but let's have. Not a show.
Kenny wanted to say something.
Mr. Chairman, she brought up a very valid point about the in-law apartments because it's actually not discussed in these regulations, and we either need to add it in or change the regulations at the accessory apartment if you want them to be permitted. So it would be very simple for us to change the use table to allow
I
them.
think it needs to be then, if that's been picked up, absolutely.
Yeah. Just because
I think the
it
commission would have thought at the time that it would be, because it's grandfathered, the whole thing, that it would pick up.
well,
on
if
the-
it's the use is not grandfathered if it doesn't exist.
Right.
Right, it's expanded, that's
Yeah.
what I was saying.
Yeah,
So
If you
this would
expand
be a new
use-
use that would be permitted. So, I mean, if you, and I guess we could have that conversation as to whether you want to have the accessory apartments permitted in all the RG zones, or just one or two, or, so.
Well, accessory structures too. if they wanted
Accessory
to-
structures are already
As long as
permitted.
they're able to.
That's-
fit
It
them
already
in
says,
Ground-wise,
Yeah.
yes.
yep, and barns, sheds, decks, garages,
Absolutely.
additions are all permitted as long as they meet the setbacks and
After
the Vulcan
discussion,
area.
after discussion, can we, if everyone considers it a good idea, could we just add accessory apartments into the use table and then just, in other words, okay.
That
I'm
would be
sorry.
the easiest
Yeah,
place
yes,
to
we
have it.
can, but we would need to know whether you want it in one or all of them. So just so we know, so it's clear. We would probably modify
I
the
use
other
the
regs
word,
too.
I think is
In-law.
brought up, Kenny
Probably
just said
in-law.
in-law.
It's interchangeable in the zoning regs, but it is in
In-law
law.
or relative.
Law is blood, like you said,
Yes,
apartment is not.
yes. But one of the planners before Lori
Aren't after
changed it.
rentals.
So the accessory apartment section, which is, do you still have that up?
That's what I'm saying. The
It's
accessory apartment.
4.5.10.
Yep, it should be
accessory
changed
apartments.
to in-law.
So we could either modify that section to allow it in whatever river gateway zone, or we can put it,
Yeah.
or we could do both and put it in as a permitted use
Yeah,
in the use table for this zone.
yeah. I think it's
That one we
confusing.
just changed because we require it to be stripped if they move.
Right, but the reason is, like Lori says, in one section it says accessory apartment. That means, in theory, people will think that they can rent it out to anyone they want. And it should say, instead of accessory apartment, it should say in-law apartment.
Yeah,
Because everywhere else in the regs it says in-law
in-law.
apartment.
That's why the zoning regs need to be gone through.
Yes.
Well, one
yes.
of many reasons.
Well,
I
well,
know. Yep.
Yeah, we have, and two, we have accessory apartment definition, which says nothing about
In-laws.
in-law or
we
anything.
don't
So
allow.
if that's, that's something important too in our definitions.
Put it in here and then modify that later. So I would suggest that you just put it into the use table under the gateway districts, and then we will modify the regulations at a later time.
I think that's a good
because
idea.
because the requirements for accessory apartments are a little bit more onerous for R33 than it
Thank
would
you
be
for-
for here, I think.
Right.
She'd also brought up a ribbon cutting on Prospect Street. She was asking about that. Does anybody have the answer for her?
Yes, that's, I believe it's 94 Prospect. It's adjacent to Kelly Fredette, and it is a brownfield. We have a fund for that, that we are working on cleaning up the brownfield.
The old tank and meter place?
Oh, I know which one it is. There was an old
I don't know if that's what it was.
vehicle down there. yeah.
However, we are moving forward, and we want to start cleanup. And so what they were proposing to do in the near future is to clear the lot, put the fencing up, and then have a ribbon cutting before they start the remediation.
Is that a privately owned parcel?
I believe the town owns it currently.
Yeah,
Good.
but I think it's going to
There's a
be.
But
business
we're-
on one end and Kelly Fredette on the last, and it was a vacant plot, and there's an old vehicle in there, and other junk has been thrown in, I guess.
Years. Okay.
Okay, by hands now, because I don't have any more unless there are more sheets there. Anyone like Karen?
Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple Street. Okay, let's start with the map. How far north do these zones go? Do they end right there? River Gateway 1, does it include the Northeast Utilities property further north along the river? Or it looks like it continues, but it's hard to tell. And also there's some, what looks like River Gateway 1 over maybe near Lafayette Park area. Does it continue up that way?
I think that's a cemetery, isn't it? Is that the cemetery?
And I guess how far south?
I asked the same question.
Yeah.
So apparently, the newer map got cut off when they created it, but there was a map, what's the date of that? On
June 25th.
6/25/18, which actually does extend just slightly to the north and south of the 6/29 map. So we could make that available.
Okay. All right, so that takes care of that map. All right, on the handout that you had tonight, the back of the map, you have section, River Gateway 4, description is single family to 4 dwelling units. On what got emailed to us, the chart does not have, let me see the difference here. River Gateway 4, it says 5+ unit residential. Has that been changed on River Gateway 4? Is 5+ unit not allowed in 4 now? Or was this a
That may have been my
typo?
error. That may have been my error.
It's just conflicting and
You are absolutely correct, and it does allow up 5+ units.
up to 5, okay. So the chart is right.
The chart
The
is
table,
correct.
the table 6.2 is
Right.
correct,
The
okay.
use table is correct.
Okay.
My notes are not.
All right, so going on to River Gateway 3 in the area of Kelly Fredette. That Prospect Street property you were just talking about, the town owns, I believe it's going to be sold to Kelly Fredette. With it being changed to River Gateway 3, it's a non-conforming use. It won't fit into their lumberyard plan. So you're not going to be able to let them develop that. So this will be a problem if you change that. I'm thinking, and you're not allowing him to expand. I mean, if he ever wants to expand, I mean, that's a huge business in town. I mean, they have 2 places in town, but that's a huge business. And I would think, I know we're talking some areas where we want to be able to put some bigger areas where we want to put, you know, where Building and Grounds is and along that Prospect Street area, but you can't, I don't think you can change this. I don't see Kelly Fredette going away anytime soon. And we can't plan for 100 years, I'm sorry. We just can't. We can't plan for 10 years on our POCD and stick to it. So I don't see these regulations holding for more than a few years. So let me just take an example of the large parcel in River Gateway 4 that Mr. Levitz was talking about, or possibly even along Main Street there where Yankee Bait is. If they divide those parcels into 4 50-foot frontages, is that considered a subdivision? If it's one parcel now? And does it go under the subdivision regulations?
Yeah, it has to.
Well, I'm asking, I don't know, because you're saying that they can put, housing services for rail and everything, but if he separates it into 4,000-foot lots, I don't know if he's got the depth or not, but if he puts 50-foot lots with single-family homes or multifamily homes or whatever, that meets the frontage, I don't know. I just wanted to know if that was considered a subdivision, and then do the subdivision regulations kick in?
You would have to, if it's a single lot now. And
Matt, your mic, please. Put your mic on if you're going to talk, Charlie. We can't hear you back there.
Mic is on.
Well, I guess you gotta get close.
If it's a single lot now and you divide it up, you have to come in for a subdivision application.
I can hear you because I'm close, but I don't hear it
I
coming
have the
over the
mic
top,
right here.
but whatever. Okay, let's go on to 6.3, River Gateway requirements. The first floor of all building space that fronts Main Street, North Main Street, and Pearl Street within River Gateway 5 district shall be occupied by retail, restaurant, service, recreation, office, or municipal uses. Residential uses in said areas are prohibited. So Bigelow fronts on Main Street. So are you saying all of Bigelow, the first floor apartments, can't be?
Grandfather.
They're grandfathered.
I understand the grandfather, but if they come in for a change, it's not going to be allowed. If they're going to put apartments on that back side, that's all part of Main Street. If they go all the way over to Whitworth or, because there's some apartments that still haven't been done, I believe. They're still not fully developed. So you're not going to allow them to put apartments on first floor. It has to be retail. Just asking.
She's 100% correct. South
Well,
River
we just
Street has a
changed that.
huge building that's
Steve Costello
undeveloped
is
Yeah,
letter.
that is.
on Bigelow.
Yeah.
So, you're going to be forcing them, plus the
That's where they
no
have
parking
the
in the
entrance.
front yard setback. That's all Bigelow has.
Isn't Bigelow a special development district all by itself? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I think that would be the cushion that would be needed.
Is that on these maps?
It wouldn't, no,
No.
just like, this is just what's proposed, Ken. It's not what's already there. They put a special development district just for Bigelow so that they could put apartments in there.
Yeah, but
And
you're doing
mixed
away with
use.
that.
Stays in effect.
Right.
This override it.
No,
Yeah.
that doesn't override it.
So then there should be a big blotch
Yes,
on
there
this
should
map
be.
that shows that that's exempt.
Yes, there should be. You're right. You're right.
Lori.
Or you get rid of the special development district because you're allowing the same housing in River Gateway 5. So looking at the map on River Gateway 5, we have frontages on Enfield Street and Alden Avenue. So why aren't those streets included in the streets where they should be commercial, retail, restaurant, service, and not residential? I mean, if we can't put commercial on the first floor in Enfield Street, I think it's going to be pretty bad. Includes the bank area,
Specialist that came in and did this.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. One was commercial.
I just think Main Street, North Main, Pearl Street are limiting us where we could even include, not necessarily Alden, but some of Alden already has commercial on the first floor if it's on the other side of the church. But I don't even think that, I don't know if that property's included or not. I can't tell. But Enfield Street, definitely, I think. You know, if those retail establishments want to go up, those could be all residential, but the first floor has to be commercial according to this River Gateway 5. So, Section 6.4, the legally permissible on-street parking, parking within municipal parking lots, or parking secured at a privately owned parking facility via a parking agreement, provided these resources are within 500 feet of the site in question, may be used to satisfy up to 50% of the parking requirements. I don't come into town too much when there's a lot of snow, and I don't know how fast these parking lots fill up, but I know they already tell people get off the street during a snowstorm, and if we're already filling those parking lots that we have, and I think I did some kind of study that said we had less than an acre of public parking in town. How can we say that somebody building a facility can use those parking spaces if they're kind of already counted for when it snows? You're not going to reserve a spot for 12 North Main Street, are you? On a public spot? Are you going to put a sign on there and says reserved for just that one building? I don't think so. I mean, we went over this when Peter was trying to propose that, and it was, I don't know how you're going to make that work.
That's what.
It just seems difficult.
So,
Yes.
owning property in a town that has a serious parking issue because they allowed housing to be built without parking for those housing. Years later, now people are trying to park wherever they can park. And it came up about reserving a spot in a public roadway for a particular private residence. And it is not legal unless the entire town becomes resident parking only. And so being involved in that, for me to allow a structure to be built without adequate parking for that structure is going to be a very tough sell on me. So I agree with you, Karen.
And Karen, possibly instead of the word shall, we should say is encouraged in that, section for, the retail being on the first floor in 6.3. And again, I think it's a language thing in terms of, I think that we encourage it, but the shall is kind of is the wrong word to be utilized there. So and if we say is encouraged, that allows it to be either or, you don't have to, but we would like to see that.
I would rather see retail on the first floor on all these commercial streets. Right. I think it needs to be, because one of the things when we were doing that Main Street, trying to go with Main Street project, the Main Street thing, they said we didn't have enough commercial to support the residential. So if we're not requiring that to be commercial, I think we need to.
But I think that zone River Gateway 5 allows for a more higher density residential areas, and so what we're trying to do is encourage higher density areas, because there's only so much retail that can be supported by a relatively small section of town, so that you eventually there's not enough people to support that retail. So I think that you can't have 25 coffee shops. You might get away with 2 or 3, but 25 is too much. So I think that by and again,
walkable neighborhood commercial districts, Richard, is what you have.
I know.
For the description, it's commercial. It's not residential.
Right.
Residences,
but it's
that
more
will serve local residents and future commuters. So
it has to be a high density in terms of until we get the kind of densities that we saw being displayed in a photograph.
But RG5 is 5+ residential units, up to 5+.
But
so
what we need is 5+ stories, not 5+ units.
Well, I don't know. This is the area you've got all the commercial buildings in that zone. Pretty much everything is allowed in RG5. So I would think you'd want to keep the first floor all commercial, so, to be consistent.
Some of this too, there were two groups working, and the commercial part was done by another group and another consultant. And they tried to combine them. Now, whether they combine evenly, that's what you're, or successfully, that's what I guess you're finding some of it.
Well, the other thing I remember in some of the previous meetings is you talked about having more than one structure on a lot. Where is that, or did you take it out? Because 6.8 talks about building massing, but I don't see where it's allowed anywhere.
You don't know.
It's on page 10 of the printout, on my page 10 anyway, whether it's your page 10 or not. So for sites with multiple buildings proposed, building footprints should be varied in size and shape so as to avoid monotony of structures. Primary structure shall be oriented to the street. But where do you say you can have more than one building on a lot? In the regular zoning regs?
No.
Well, 6.8 is finished.
Industrial there was, but I don't think it was residential or commercial.
There's, I don't know if it's on page 10, you have orientation of buildings with more than one building on a lot.
I understand that. I see that description, but I don't know where you can do this within these zoning regs, within these particular RG 1 to 5. Can you do it in all of them?
If they fit, I guess. I know they
in the
used as
business
an
use
example.
table.
Because at one point, when the guy that was helping you talked about, I got the impression I could put another building, a full building in my lot on Russell Street because I have an oversized lot. I could put a whole nother building, 2-story building with apartments and everything in there. And then let them park on the street
You don't
now.
have a setback. The example he used was
I got plenty deep lot.
The corner of Main and Pearl Street at the bridge site, but we pointed out the fact that there's a sewer that runs under there, and the building would probably not be able to be built.
Actually, for the more than one principal building on a lot, under the business section, 5.10.14 does allow for us to consider via special permit in the business district zone to put multiple buildings, more than one building on a lot. So
Okay, so it's
there, and then
so not residential.
I'm taking a look at residential. I don't know about residential. That's
Because actually in RG5, the side yards, setback is indicated as 5 with a footnote number 5. And footnote number 5 says that buildings may be built to the common lot line, provided the party of other walls separating them are of masonry construction and without openings. So basically what they're saying is that in RG5, that would be allowed.
yes.
So, and again, I think that's going back to the fact that, we're encouraging higher density, closer, spacing and more population in RG5 so that it can support, all the retail that we're trying to develop there. And again, I think that, there's only a finite number of retail establishments that can be supported by, even the whole town. And to try to put them all, in Thompsonville and recognizing that all the shopping malls that we have everywhere else are going to, be attracting people too, so that it'd be difficult to believe that, a significant amount of retail could actually exist in Thompsonville.
Well, footnote 5 also is for RG3, RG4, and RG5 for front yard setback.
Yeah, I'm looking for side yard, because what we're saying is that the only way that you can build two buildings side by side would be the fact that, they could be built to the common line, and then you can have multiple buildings that could articulate back and forth. So the side lot would be the one that would control whether you can have two buildings, side by side.
Well, in the residential section, under 3.3, 0.7 accessory buildings, as long as it meets the requirements of, the size of it, where it's placed, so on and so forth, that's a part of that massing, because you can have it in a residential district as well as the commercial, you can have one that, and it's got all the requirements here of what you would need to do in order to be able to have an accessory building.
But an accessory building is like a garage or something like that. It's not, your
still
consultant was talking, I believe, about a garage with an apartment up above.
Exactly, yep, and
So he's saying, your regulations are saying you can do that.
accessory buildings, yeah.
You
an
can't put
accessory-
an apartment over an accessory
No.
Karen, you're saying you
Accessory structure.
accessory structure with an apartment on top, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I thought I heard in one of the last ones that as long as you have not fulfilled your building lot coverage, your impervious surfaces, that you could put an additional structure on a residential lot and build another apartment building on your lot if you had an oversized lot.
No, that was an idea that the consultant and Michael floated, but it didn't float very well for very long.
Not a multi-family.
No.
Not multi.
So are you saying in a business zone, I think you need to clarify that, where it's allowed. That's all.
Yes.
I think that was it. Let me see. Let me just
Richard,
check.
so
quick.
you're saying in that zone, the buildings could actually touch each other on the side yards?
That's what our proposed zoning regulations say.
Okay, so I just want to bring to light that a lot of other towns have allowed that, but with the new fire codes, it makes it impossible to maintain it. Because so many units or more, you have to have sprinklers throughout, you have to have fire alarms throughout. And when you have multiple owners, you can't force me to put sprinklers in because you want to do something different in your space, or me to upgrade my space because you want to change the use of yours or whatever. And the buildings end up being empty and being condemned
See,
because.
I don't think the fire codes, Kenny, were even thought of.
It's a big one.
In terms of, it says it has to be of masonry construction. So basically what they're saying is you have to build a firewall on your side of the line.
I understand that
And then
totally.
he builds a firewall on
But
his
if the
side of the line.
buildings connect.
Well, they're not connected. They never touch in terms of their.
They touch all the time.
Yeah,
If you
but-
can go to a zero lot
Well,
line.
well, the thing is, you could never get so close. There's always a micro space between them. If you have two wides of masonry,
All right,
unless they're
let's
bonded
try-
together, they're going to be separate buildings.
There was one other thing I just thought of and now I forgot. Oh, I know what it was. I believe on both North and South River Street, there are two-family houses.
Yes, there are.
So right now, you're not allowing two-family, you're just allowing single-family. I don't know how the residents feel about allowing the two families on there, but you might want to consider allowing the two-family and the single-family because they already exist. But it's up to you. It's up to you and it's up to them. I don't want to throw another wrench in the.
Well, Karen, realistically, with the feedback that we're getting right now, it might be just easier to keep it an R Rivergate 2, and everything disappears in terms of, and everybody's happy and nothing ever really changed.
Right.
But nothing ever really would have changed anyway. So,
Right.
I think that there's a misconception where people hear one word and they don't necessarily recognize, the complexity of the remainder of the paragraph. They hear one word, but there's 15,000 words in that paragraph. So, but anyways.
Well, the other thing Ken was talking about, the barns not being able to rebuild and everything. There is something in your zoning regulations that if something is non-conforming and it burns down, you don't rebuild it within a year. You cannot rebuild it.
That's true.
So that is in your zoning regulations. Because the house behind me over here on Church Street, on my Russell Street property, burned like 3 Christmases ago or 4 Christmases ago. And after that first year, he couldn't rebuild.
That's right.
And so there's three
It's
buildings on that property.
18 months to pull a building permit and stick a shovel in the ground, not to build it. You have 18 months to work it out with your insurance company, pull a building
Understand.
permit and
No,
stick a shovel
it
in the
says
ground.
a year.
Grandfathered, that doesn't mean grandfathered then. That means they're restricted if their house burns to the ground and within 18 months now, they don't pull a building permit,
Right.
they're out.
Well,
So
Where do you get 18 months?
it's in the zoning regulations, Karen.
you changed it to 18?
like about 2 years ago, 18
whether
months.
it's 18
When-
months or 12 months,
when
it's still,
Lori
you don't have the
Lonnie's-
freedom
Right.
of your own property,
Right.
which they could, in
Right.
essence, be forced
Right.
to follow
Well,
new
the issue with
guidelines.
this guy over here was he had 3 structures on one lot.
Very
Yeah.
well.
And one very large structure on the one lot and 2 other small structures, which
Now, there's
I didn't want to see that rebuilt.
Right, now, there's a perfect property the town should purchase, level it, and make a parking lot out of it. Then they
That'd
can
be
put
nice.
any restriction they want on it, because the town owns it.
It's on the
Right.
list to do that, I believe.
Well, it's on the list to be demolished. Who knows what's going to happen?
Town's demolishing it.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else address the commission?
More times.
Oh, I know, I just, Lori. Well, I know, it's amazing they don't want to, and I'd like to have them, because we got some good information on. We're getting some good input, people, and if you got it, let us know.
One thing I'd like to ask the chair is, Richard had made a comment about the minutes being very vague on these meetings. And I think we're all understanding that clarification is a big part of what the people are not getting. And there are no minutes that they can really review. And I know we corrected it on planning and zoning, we're getting the minutes quick. But I really think the details of these meetings need to be put out so the general public can read it, because like me, I was just appointed, trying to catch up and read what all the comments are and everybody. So right now, I may be saying things that have been beat to death, but it's because I don't have everything to go back to. And I think a lot of the public can't make it to all these meetings. So if we could get proper minutes taken and get them posted, people have time to go home, read them, write their questions down,
Well,
so
some
they're not
of our-
sitting here.
Some of our problems are that zoning regulations are rather confusing. If you've got to jump from one page to another page to another page. The women have been working on it, but with all the other things they're doing, it needs, the whole thing needs to be gone through and redone and
Right, but even
updated.
having
And-
adequate minutes of
Oh, I
these
know,
meetings
that's for these, yeah.
I mean, you can have the regulations, you can go back and forth on your computer, and, you can dissect it. And
Yes,
we're not getting.
come on forward. Good. Give them time to think of something.
Hello. My name is Joe Saxton. I live at 76 South River Street. And I have, I keep on hearing you're changing the zoning because R33 is out of date or whatever it is. But you must have put R33 in at one time.
Yeah, they did.
And the reasoning behind that was to limit density in the town. That would make, you'd have to have a big lot to build in this town.
Absolutely.
Well, now you're going to change them again. And you're taking, like Mr. Levitt said, you're going to be taking property rights away from people that bought their property with that zoning in place.
But it's putting it back to what your regulations are or were.
Well, either way, you're still, people buy their property looking at all that stuff. And then when you change them, who knows what's going to happen next week.
But R33 really wasn't the proper.
But I mean, this wholesale rezoning of the town is under the guise of transportation. I feel is too much. I mean, I don't think that the train station is going to be much more than a glorified bus station. people aren't clamoring for transportation now. You only have a couple buses in town. I don't even think you have a bus to Springfield.
Well, I think what they're planning on is the New York to, well, up into, I guess, Vermont.
It's already in effect. It's already in effect, and they go right by us. They don't even stop here.
No, and that's what the plans are in the future, to add that as a
Well,
stop. But that, I don't
that's
know.
that's still up in the air.
Right.
You know, I mean,
You're right.
but why go through all this wholesale zoning when you know it's not here?
Well, it was hopefully to increase the businesses.
Have you seen any of the train schedules that are going by here? A lot of them turn in Hartford too.
Yeah.
A lot of this was put in when it was put in. It's from Hartford to New Haven mostly.
New Haven to Springfield. Yeah.
Well, it goes to Springfield. It goes right by here. I see the trains every day going
They
right
do.
by.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
one of the reasons we're changing it was because everything you want to do in a house when it's an R33, you have to come before us for a special use permit and all this. When you go back to the other standard, you can do it by right. You don't have to bother coming down here to get
Well, why
permission.
not just change it back to where it was then, instead of all these
Okay, That's
gateways?
what they are.
They're basically
They are getting back to where
with
they
different
were.
names.
Just a different name, that's all.
That might be true,
But
but a
thing
lot
is-
of it I feel is being written by developers. Your consultants. So do you have developers already in place for a lot of this?
No.
No,
Because you're trying to get, it seems like they're trying to
This was
get
under the advice of consultants.
In the state.
in the state.
Well, the special use thing for the transit-oriented development, this whole area is all in a 1 mile radius or whatever the thing
I
is.
saw that, but the thing is,
You
the thing
need the
is that you don't
transportation.
know. If you look at all the plans from before, like the Maha report and going back years, they didn't even expect that many people to use the train down here.
Yeah.
And I don't see where they're going to get a big
Well, the
use.
towns that have it have been growing.
Well, it was state money, I mean, that's
Well, state money, federal
well,
money.
East Windsor, don't they go for transit-oriented development? What is it?
Yeah, they got a train station.
How did they ever get in it? They walk on water over to Windsor Locks?
So,
It's the only way you could.
right, so East Windsor actually is planning for development in conjunction with the transit-oriented development in Winter
Because of the
Locks.
half mile?
Yeah,
What did you do?
But
Draw a
it's
circle from the station?
feasible. They're actually doing a study right now.
But don't you, to get to where you are, it'd be more than a half mile. You'd have to go all the way to the bridge in the center of town and back down. I mean,
We'd still fall in it, but I mean,
I just
Winter
feel,
Locks is going through the same thing.
you're going too fast, with everything, and it's not very well thought out.
No, it's just like the rail. Used to have two rails running through town, and they pulled one out. Now they want to put it back.
You know what? They did that originally for taxes. In certain towns they had to pay the taxes, so they pulled the one out. All they had to do is take one length of rail, and they wouldn't be able to use it. But it's just seems like you're going too fast here. For I don't think you're going to see the benefit.
Well, thank you, though. I don't know. Lori, where are you?
We're discussing where we go from here.
That's right.
So, I mean, the commission had suggested that you might want to have another workshop before the October 13th. I don't know whether you were thinking of next week, but we could theoretically schedule it next week. I just don't know whether or not we will have opportunity to do all the work that may be needed.
Probably in the middle of
I
next
mean,
month would be better.
So, but we have an October 13th deadline to get the final draft to OPM. That's the requirement of the grant.
Well, the other part of ordinances is you can have them today, make them today and change them tomorrow. So
That is absolutely
we can still
true,
do
but-
the other adjustments
Yeah.
after they're in place.
I believe that with any regulation. I mean, it should be dynamic and change with the times and needs,
What's
but
on
you
the-
don't want to adopt something that,
What's on the
It's not
agenda
quite-
for the regular meeting?
do we know?
Right now, we only really have one application going forward. It's O'Reilly Auto Parts. Other than that, the other application that would be on the agenda would just be you guys accepting an extension to open the public hearing for the liquor
Don't
store.
we have two? Isn't
We got one this
the
morning.
Enfield Street
Yeah, they want an extension.
again?
So, and Lori mentioned one other.
Yeah, it's a phasing plan, just a modification of a phasing plan. Shouldn't be too long.
Modification of what?
A phasing plan for build out of a subdivision. Well, it's actually not a subdivision, planned
Oh, okay.
residential.
Well,
that's
I know
why I
that.
said-
Yeah, that's.
And I understand we just put a lot on your plate. And
Yeah, what else,
Well-
what else are you working on that you've got to drop?
Do you want to see the list?
when do you think you can have it done?
Well, I've just started to become acquainted with this essentially this
Understood.
week.
Yeah.
So I have not had the privilege of being
that's
to
a
all the other hearings, and the ladies here have, and they've got some good
So that's
ideas
the
as to
trouble, Michael never
potential
gave us this
changes. We'd have to kind of sit down. So our next meeting is next Thursday, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, this room is available on Tuesday. Again, I'm not sure if we would be able to get all of this. That would mean we need to get all of this out to you guys by tomorrow, which I don't think is a realistic goal.
No.
But I think first and foremost, we need to go over what it is that we are going to be looking into changing for you guys. So I've sort of started a rough list, and I want you guys to, and Lori has as well, but I mean, if you guys want to just go over that first so that we're not missing anything, I think that would be helpful first, and then we can sort of go from there and see how much work we actually really have to do, and how much time that will take. So, Lori, do you want to go
Hey,
over
if you had
this
a chance,
first?
to- let's go down to the end here. If you had a chance to go over this since it's come out,
Over this?
Yeah.
As much as I can, like I said.
right,
with-
you any suggestions right yet? Let's say that they should take a look at?
Well, like the parking and everything that was discussed tonight, I have to say, I agree with 95% of every one of their concerns. And I think they brought up a lot of valid points.
Well, yeah,
That, I would want to see answers and suggestions for every one of their concerns. And, time, I mean, because here we are now, the grant runs out, it's gotta be in by
Well,
this
I
date.
know, I
And
know.
all of a sudden, it's getting forced down everybody's throat, including ours, which.
I was
I'm
gonna
not
say,
good with that. I mean, does the town, is the town council want this grant?
Well,
I mean, explain what the grant is for.
The grant was to create transit-oriented development regulations in Thompsonville. And the consultants have been paid with the grant already.
So we already spent the money, we need the grant to get the money.
So, I apologize that I'm coming into
No,
this so late,
absolutely.
and I
No,
feel
I-
bad because
this all
I think
needs to
that this
come out, and
could
it
be,
needs to
this
be
needs to be
seen and-
tweaked. The best thing I could say is I
Let
could
me
only
go.
call
Let-
OPM and
ask you the
tell
same
them
question.
the predicament we're in.
Or we simplify it to where it's understandable by
Yeah.
somebody, a simple person like me, because some of the question,
Yeah.
answers that are coming out, I'm not buying them either, and, I consider myself simple. And I sat on
know.
the council and listened, and I knew what they were talking about, but I still didn't understand them.
Oh, boy.
I'm seeing some of that here, so I sympathize with the public if they're not understanding parts of it, because I don't.
So some of the things that I have kind of listed, well, they're kind of all over the place right now, but non-conforming uses clarification, subdivision clarification, because if something has to go for a subdivision, theoretically, they have to give open space. So there must be some wording in there to say that that's not required if it's not going to be required. Here's my list.
Parking, huge issue.
The building massing and more than one building on a lot, home occupations, accessory apartments, I guess clarification of the open space for the 10,000 square feet, and I think that, I'm not sure if there is clarification. That's what it is, that's what it was meant to be, and I'm not sure if, it certainly ties into the TOD experience, that pedestrian-friendly, you know, let's hang out on the street and drink our coffee on the park bench type thing. But it seems that there are a lot of concerns about that. So maybe we need a little bit more clarification on that end. Seeing if I see anything else.
It's gonna take more than.
Rear lots, would we permit rear lots? And that came up when I was thinking about subdivisions. What about agricultural uses? Are they just not permitted?
Rich,
Isn't agriculture as of right?
well, are you done, Ken? Okay, Rich.
Is
Because-
agriculture as of right anywhere?
Lori, the way I see it is that, you know, most of the concern today was in zones one, the change of the South River Street to Zone 1. So, you know, obviously, you know, if we can alleviate all those concerns by returning it to Rivergate 2, then, you know, that's 90% of the discussion that we had today. The other area that I think that we need to address is really, you know, Rivergate Way 4. In terms of, you know, realistically, River Gateway 4 was always part of the municipal open space zone for the first 4 months, and then the last month it did change to Rivergate 4. And originally it was supposed to be, you know, a zone that was going to be allow more intensive use than the Rivergate 1 because of the fact that we wanted to develop that area a little better. But then all of a sudden, in my viewpoint, it turned into a mini Rivergate 5, which is the most intensive use, you know, along the river. And, you know, from going from an open space municipal, you know, low, you know, impact, you know, development to a high impact development, and recognizing the constraints that are there in terms of, you know, similar to what Mr. Levitt said, is that, you know, if he wanted to, you know, utilize some of his property and create all these mini lots that are allowed in that zone, you know, it doesn't make sense. So, you know, I think that, you know, for the most part, you know, except for, you know, what's going up, you know, the river towards the center of town, most of the lots that are along, you know, North River Street and South River Street are approximately like an R33 almost. You know, I think that, so I think that, you know, maybe what we can do is we can simplify that zone to alleviate a lot of that problem, you know, along those lines by, you know, making it, you know, a little, you know, getting back to our original intention was the fact that we didn't want to take people's land and restrict people from developing their land, and we wanted to have multiple uses of that land, especially around the river. We wanted to possibly have a restaurant, possibly to have a bait shop, possibly to have, you know, a boat shop or somewhere where you can rent boats or something like that. So we were encouraging development along the river, along that side, but not necessarily looking at as intensive development as we have in zone number 5. So I think that, you know, we could alleviate, you know, possibly a lot of those concerns about zone 4, you know, by, you know, actually just going back to what our original intention was, is to have, you know, a zone 1, but allow, you know, development along that zone, rather than restrict development, which is what everybody else was saying for Zone 1, is that it doesn't allow anything. And that's why we changed it to some other zone other than 1, but not necessarily a 5, or just below a 5, which seems ludicrous for such a small area of land. So after that, I think everything else falls into place, you know? So I think that if we look at those two, you know, areas and, you know, rezoned, you know, the South River Street to Zone 2 where everybody's comfortable with it being, and then, you know, sort of look at Zone 4 and not necessarily have it the most developable part of the land, but have it a step up from Zone 1, not a step down from Zone 5. So I think that, you know, with that kind of mixture, you know, I feel that it probably, solves the majority of problems that we've seen today.
I was going to add to what he said. Steve Catella was the one brought up the restaurant. That he actually had a restaurant there way back when. Then he asked whether, and suggested that be put in because down on the river. So, yeah, that should be allowed down there.
Absolutely. Look what they did on Pleasant Street.
Yep.
Breakfast place with the apartments,
the Yep.
old house.
He did such a beautiful job down there. Yep, and that's the type of thing we want to encourage.
Be able to have patio tables out on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Go ahead, we'll start at that end.
The subdivision regs, we were talking about subdivisions.
We can't hear.
Yes. Sorry, I forgot my mic. The subdivision regs. When somebody was talking about 4-lot subdivision, the first cut is as of right, and then you would have 3. If it never was divided before, you'd get the first cut for free, and then you'd have 3. And there's more than one kind of subdivision, so instead of open space, you could have fee in lieu of, and it could be adjusted to the parcel.
The property, yeah.
But very valid points. The point there being is that there needs to be a discussion as to what you want. What part of the subdivision regulations do you want to be applicable to the Rivergate zone?
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
they're exempt from open space.
I don't think you could do that, though, because I
Certainly.
think the premise of what we're doing is good, and I agree with Ken that some of it is not as
It isn't.
clear and concise as it should be. But if you allow exceptions to one specific area of town, then people from other areas of town are going to come in and want the same thing. And I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I'm just saying we have Skidco neighborhood, we have Hazardville neighborhood, we have the Lakes neighborhood, we have my subdivision, we have Ken's subdivision, and it's one of those. Where does it stop?
Well, it stops at the gateway,
Right, well,
where the gateway ends.
no other place in town allows the setbacks that are
Right.
here.
No,
So
because
you couldn't do a subdivision anywhere but here with those setbacks.
no.
So Hazardville can't say, well, how come we can't? Well, because that's not your setbacks out there.
They would come in to change them.
2 acres for one house.
They would
That's
come in to
because,
change
That's
them.
because the town was developed over the years. Well, you got 25-foot lots up at the state line area. And each section, as they were developed, had their own measurements.
Yeah.
So it's hard to zone this area, really.
Well, I think the setbacks speak for themselves, and the subdivision would have to follow the setbacks in
Yep.
that area like it does every other
Yep,
area.
yep.
Oh, I agree with you. I think the setbacks, except I'm not a fan of the 5-foot setback, but I already discussed that in a workshop. But I think that you're forgetting, Ken, you've been here longer than me. I mean, more years than me. But the fact is, developers will come to this town and they will say, well, we want to change the regs so that we can do what's done over there. And when they did Mayfield was supposed to be the only one that could be done. Now they've changed it yet again. So I'm just saying, I know zoning regulations are fluid, and that's a good thing, but I just worry, that we're creating problems.
You just changed one.
That's what she said. That's what she said.
I know.
So
Yep. But that's my point. They change.
Okay. Next.
I agree with regard to the subdivision regulations basically being referenced. And I think there definitely is some tweaking that needs to be done. One of the things I'm noticing is that we don't define, a lot of our uses here are not defined. We have no definitions for them. And I think that's an important piece because people need to have clarification and understanding of exactly what this means when somebody comes in. Some of them are pretty clear, but I think it's important that we make sure we define them because I think that's where confusion comes into, where nobody knows what you mean when you say this or when you say that. And I think definitely the clarification for the accessory apartments, I think that's something needs to be addressed. And
In-law apartments.
in-law apartments. And that actually needs to be redefined too, because one point it says accessory and then another point it hits in the regulations so I think we need to be more clear on some of that stuff. I think that's really about it at this point. I mean, I understand the concerns about changing, River Gateway, changing it to River Gateway 1 on South River Street. I do get the concerns about that. I guess for me, I'm comfortable with that. And the reason why is because in the future, if somebody decides that they want to do something or they want to sell their land and somebody comes along, that there are other uses that can be done, but we also restricted them. I also think the thing with Bigelow needs to be dealt with in River Gateway 5, so we know the special development district for that. We need to make sure we understand exactly what that entails. And I think that's it for me. So, I know. River Gateway 3, the little part where Kelly Fredette, I think that obviously we need to figure out what's going on there with that piece. I understand the concept, which is you have an industrial area smack dab in the middle of a residential area, and you're using residential streets to get to that industrial area, and that is a concern, and it's why we wanted to make some of the changes we wanted to make was in order to give relief to those residents if in the future that land does, move on to somebody else that, well, yeah, exactly. Manning Road is kind of part of the reason too, is we know that we've had some real major issues where we've had industrial zones in residential areas, and it has really affected the neighbors. So for us, it's not that we don't want that, to be industrial or to stay what it is, but in the future, if it's a possibility, then it can be something different. And I think that's always a good thing to look ahead. So, and still protects what's there. I mean, that's the way I look at it. We're planning ahead by putting stuff in place so things can happen if they're even going to happen. We don't know, but we're being proactive in that regard instead of reacting. So that's it for me.
Charlie, anything?
Yeah, and it, phone's on that River Gateway 3 down below, if the town's selling Kelly Fredette that other piece of land,
You may as well go back.
well, either that or allow a waiver in there for be able to use it for what the rest of their property is
They'd have
used
to go
for.
to ZBA.
Have to go to ZBA for it. I don't know which way you want to go with it.
There is that other regulation that allows the expansion of non-conforming uses, which is outside of. It's sort of it's covered in like the general regulations. It's not set for like only in business or residential or Thompsonville or anything. It's just you can allow the
Jen,
expansion with a special permit.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's it would if Kelly Fredette buys that piece, it's going to be under the same ownership, so they'll meld it into one lot.
Yeah.
Correct. So wouldn't that just take care of any problems because Kelly Fredette's already there?
It's grandfathered in, no expansion. So Kelly Fredette buys this piece of land, they can't build another warehouse on it?
Wait. Okay, I'm missing out here. No.
Because it wouldn't be grandfathered in.
No, it would because it's the same owners. Yeah, expansion of a non-conforming use, but it's the same owner.
We haven't even passed this and we're already looking for exceptions. I mean, how wrong is this?
Well, my other question, seeing as I still have the floor, my other question is, what is the deadline
It's too early.
for getting this approved, and why can't we get it changed?
It is my understanding that the grant ends on October 13th, and that is a hard date from Office of Policy and Management. The only thing I could do is, ask him if there's any possibility for any expansion of time, because that's when we're supposed to
Because we've had a whole staff turnover in that.
I understand that.
And
Boy, do I
hopefully-
understand that.
Well, some
Make
of
them
us-
understand that.
Yeah.
Some of us were just made aware of the deadline. I had no idea of the deadline until you called me.
How much is the grant?
I don't even know that, quite honestly. But I
It's
will.
too bad the grant's running.
What we will do is the best we can to see if we could get any
Yeah.
extensions due to the unusual
How
circumstances
about
that's occurred
contacting
here.
our representatives?
Pardon?
Our representatives and state senator.
How much have we spent
I don't
and how
know.
much is left?
All
I
of
think
it.
Ken had a good
I
point
don't,
on
I
that
don't
one.
recall what the number was, because I've been dealing with a lot of grants, so I don't want to.
No.
But
No, I understand, but-
basically what it says is that the consultants no longer have to work on it past October 13th. In terms of we can make our own changes internally. It's just that, they can't be, they can't work forever. They had to have some kind of a, okay, I'm going to work until October 13th and I'm
But
going
we
to
have
spend
to
all
have
the
a
time we
report
have.
into the state.
Yeah, but we can put the report into the state, and because it says it's a draft copy, it's not the final copy. So that by saying it's a draft copy, that means that we can still change it after we give it to the state, but we can't depend on our consultants to make those changes. We would have to make all those changes ourselves. Being a consultant, I know exactly how this works in terms of,
So-
right. We can send it in as a draft, and that they're saying this is the direction that we're going. The final, copy that you get when we submit a final copy, could be modified. But we don't. But what happens is that the consultants aren't obligated to make those modifications without additional compensation.
Absolutely correct.
So in terms
However-
of nothing stops at that point. It's just that
However, there, though.
we can't
However,
rely
they
on them.
They expect adoption as soon as possible after the draft is submitted.
Correct, but
Another-
that buys us 2 weeks or whatever we're doing, so
Yeah.
that all of a sudden we're not running around like
Give us
chickens.
2 or
Can you
3 extra
verify
weeks
that,
is what
please?
we're
Yeah,
looking
That I
that's
know.
what we need is because
Iffy.
No, that's not
need,
iffy. That's what I was told
Right.
by
we need
OPM.
another work session on this, at least. And you need time to work on it,
Well, if we,
and then we've got to have a public hearing to,
You're talking 2 weeks.
well, a lot more than that, I know.
No, she needs.
Yeah, but
October
if we
13th, you
do
said,
it,
right?
The,
if
the
it's-
draft has to be at OPM by October 13th.
2 weeks.
And
we can do
that,
the draft with the changes.
right,
Uh,
we could
Is there
maybe
any
do
way
that.
that
and then if we want
4
to
or
modify it
5
after.
could get together and on another night than Thursday? Then we could have a special meeting?
What time there?
Well, I don't know. We've done it before. The people are up against it.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, but again, I think that, if we go back to zone number 2 in a South River Street, that was 90% of our
Well, I don't know.
discussion
Is
today.
it for them?
And I believe that's it. In terms of, we're not going to change it to a more intensive zone. They just wanted it to be residential, and zone number 2 is residential. So in that vein, I think that, we can solve, 90% of that problem. And like I said before, I think that, there's these little bits and pieces that we have to take care of. But, as long as we have 95% of the document done and we're satisfied with it, to think that we're going to get this 100% accurate, everybody's fooling yourself, because nothing ever is 100%, so I think that what we can do is the best that we can, and then sort of find out where the deficiencies are as they prop up, and say, oh yeah, I guess you're smarter than I am. And the thing is, we didn't write these regulations, but we had our consultants write these regulations, so we were relying on them to make sure that there weren't any loopholes. But unfortunately, they're not looking at it as accurately as they should, or as concise as they should, so that all of a sudden it looks like we don't know what we're doing, but in reality, we had nothing other than the fact that we're telling them what we want, and it was up to them to get rid of all the loopholes, and they didn't. So, we're stuck with the loopholes, but, that doesn't mean that, we don't have something that's viable in terms of, like you said, nothing's ever perfect. It's pretty close to perfect, but nothing's ever perfect. And as soon as we realize that, you're going to live a better life all around, except that if you want perfection, you might be disappointed a lot.
Well, Rich, when you said change River Gateway 1 to River Gateway 2 because it's residential, River Gateway 1 is residential. So it's still, you know what I mean? If it makes somebody feel better just because the number changes, that's not really what it should be about because it's the same thing.
But the concept, it's that they can't get it in their head that it's the same, and it's the perception is that really what we're looking at, and I think that if we can change that perception to what they want to see, then we've solved the problem.
First of all, they can't get it in their head was totally inappropriate. Okay? And because I have a hard time getting it in my head too. And I explained that earlier. I'm trying to wrap my head around this coming into this new. I consider myself a simple person. So somebody else who may be like me is going to have a hard time understanding a lot of the language. Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 1, Zone 4, this. You're bouncing all around, which is very confusing for people trying to grasp this.
That's true.
All right? And that comment is just so wrong. Okay? Now,
I apologize.
I have the floor.
I really apologize.
So my concerns would be Bigelow on the map, if it's a special district and it's not getting changed, they're exempt, please have it on the map, a different color, and break it out that we made an exception for them. Kelly Fredette, the largest business in Thompsonville.
You got to drop
okay?
that.
If we pass this, they don't go unless we make an exception for them. So now we have the biggest apartment complex is an exception, the biggest business is an exception. So why don't we just make the people an exception too? And just change whatever zone we have now and make the few little changes that you want to make to enhance it. But adding all this other stuff, you got zone 5s all over the place, zone 3s, and I don't understand what the whole change is. In the 70s, they thought it was a great idea. Move all the businesses to the center of town. Center of town, the mall is dead.
Well, somebody suggested before about the studies we've already spent money on, and what happened to the studies.
Mm-hmm. Go up in the attic of the
Forgot
town
about it.
hall.
Yeah.
You can see the vision of Thompsonville they had, and I bet you they spent hundreds of thousands on that huge model. Don't look anything like it.
That's right.
And
I saw the
now
model.
that's dead.
Yep.
And now the center of town is not far behind it, and that's because of a decision that was rushed by this very commission.
Look at the plans for redevelopment way back when they tore everything
That's
down.
what I'm talking
Oh,
about,
yeah.
Charlie,
Oh,
in
yeah.
the 70s.
Yeah.
And here we are again making another huge change on Thompsonville that so far, I don't know who it benefits.
Charlie?
I mean, we're coming up with major issues right now, and we haven't even passed anything.
Yeah.
Wait, so we'll make an exception.
Yes.
That doesn't cut it.
Lori, are there specific guidelines for this grant? In other words, the grant's title is transit oriented, and I get confused with the zones too. But the premise was, if I understood the consultants correctly, that it was going to be walkable. People could go out, and more of a neighborhood feel. And are we held to a certain thing with this grant?
The purpose of the grant was to create regulations that were going to tie into the transit-oriented development. You wanted to have the higher densities closer to the train station, mixed use closer to the train station, pedestrian-friendly, complete streets, so the buses and bike ped and wheelchairs, whoever can access all of the...
Charlie says if we don't get the higher density, the train's not going to stop here. You've got to have the ridership in order to get the station.
That's
and
true.
that's the reason for density change.
And if we don't have the right zoning in place, we're not going to get the train because they said, well, they're not ready.
That's true, and that's
Well,
what
that's-
all the other towns are doing as well.
Thompsonville's pretty high density
Yes,
already.
it is. Well, I don't know.
But they want to mix.
What?
I don't know.
It's my understanding, Lori, that they want to mix.
They want some mixed uses, yes.
Thompsonville is high density. There's small lots, big houses, but I think they want more than just what's there now. And
Higher density.
yeah,
Yeah.
but isn't it a mix for the higher density and
Sure.
spreading it out more?
Somewhat, yeah.
Well, I guess for me, we're making changes to the zones. And pretty much everything that's there can stay there. So if something happens, we have things in place for what we want, a plan. If we want development here, development there, if we want to do this, do that. And if it doesn't, like it did in the 70s or whenever, then it'll just be the same and it's not going to change. So to me, I'd rather be proactive and get things set up. So if the possibility is there, if we get this a train station, then we can be there to plan for pedestrian friendly, be able to have some of those things going for Thompsonville. Other than that, we're just going to be in the same place we've been forever, you know? And so I think that being proactive, but we also need to be, yes, careful about what we're putting in place, and we have to have a good understanding of it and what it can bring and what, you know, the regulations say, especially definitions, all sorts of stuff. So we're all on the same page, yeah. So.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, Jen, do you have any other comments? Potential
I
changes?
did have a list, but between Charlie and Mary, you guys covered everything on it, so thank you.
Awesome. So what we're kind of just bantering here, we're thinking, I mean, time being of issue, we were thinking if it's okay, we could try to work on these as best we can and have another draft for you available for Thursday night. I don't think we're going to be able to get it to you sooner than that and to the public sooner than that. So we could maybe just have a little workshop on that, and then we could set a workshop for the following week for maybe some final tweaks.
all right.
Meanwhile, I will call OPM and see what I could do about the time frame. And if we could get it extended, that'll be awesome. He just kept saying there are no extensions. So I could only do what I could do. But just
Show
given
us
the
how
time.
good you are, Lori. Get us an extension.
You never know. So we'll do the best we can by
that's all you can
Thursday.
do.
I just can't. We cannot promise you to have it too much ahead of that.
But parking's got to be addressed too, Charlie,
Well,
because
isn't
we
that
are.
down that she's got? No, I know, because every time we try to do anything down there, it's parking. One of the main problems was in the regulation, it allows for a business or people to take off-street parking in a town parking lot and include that in their
Right. Right.
the regulations. But then nobody kept track of it, so you've got a small parking lot with maybe 4 or 5 businesses using that as their requirement.
Right. I'm okay with
you
a
can't fit 'em.
business being able to share a parking lot, but every single residential unit built should have adequate parking for
yeah,
that residential
yep.
unit. And that's the problem we
Yeah.
have,
Yep.
is those business parking lots are also the residential parking lots.
They are,
So, yeah.
yeah. I imagine in snowstorms, they have a big,
Oh my, God,
big
we're gonna make it
scramble
worse.
for the town parking lots.
Mr. Chair?
Like I say, the best we can do is we'll
That's
do
all
our
we can ask
best.
for, Laura.
That's all we can-
That's all we can ask for. Thank you.
And so we'll put it on the agenda, public, we'll put it on the agenda for a workshop, but I just don't know how much in advance we're going to be able to give the regulations out. So we will make sure that whatever we have plenty of copies for whoever is in the audience.
What, or can they pick them up ahead of time or
If
whatever?
if they're ready.
Or
I
what
just don't know. Again, I know
This is for our
personally
next
I
regular
have some
meeting.
things that I have to get done for town council for Monday night, and some other things and other grants that I've been working on. Oh, I
Next, so
they pay the bills.
Where would you suggest putting that on the agenda? Maybe, I was going to say,
Got to be on the end. 'cause we gotta
on
get
the
to
end.
At the end, yeah. I don't think that the meeting should be very long.
Well, I hope.
But I don't think we should,
So-
make O'Reilly wait anymore.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Again, I just want you to realize that we'll be bringing the regulations with us. If for some magical reason we get them done beforehand, we'll let you know.
Request a secretary to help you out with some of the secretarial work from.
Yeah, well, we didn't even have a recording secretary tonight, so we're gonna have to find somebody
Oh, I know
to
that,
translate.
Yeah.
I mean, to
This-
help you with the typing
yeah.
or work on some of this instead of.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, we're kind of used to having stuff hit us with it the night of the meeting anyways,
Yeah.
because we've been doing it for the last 3 years.
Yeah, but
it-
it should have.
The public wants to
I
see
know.
it.
Yeah, and the public
Right.
absolutely
They
needs
may
to
have
see
to
it,
take it off the table like we do
Right, I understand.
for that meeting.
Yeah.
right?
Well, I don't know. Not if she's able to request a second typist up there instead
Yeah,
of,
well.
and then
The recording secretary has already offered to do minutes
Could fly, we'd
for
have
this
to fly in
meeting
hand.
based off of the YouTube, because this is actually recorded, like
Okay,
actually
great.
on for ETV. So this will also be online.
Yeah.
well, no,
So,
they'll
well,
be working on the.
I think we know what our task is, and we'll find whoever it is to help us do it. Mostly, we're going to have to create the regulations and make sure that they're cross-referenced accordingly.
Okay,
And that's
the
what's
commission
really
also-
what missing from what I see.
To the public, just so. Anyone in the public would like to address the commission before he closes the hearing? Anyone? Yes, please come forward. No, up to the mic, please. Name and address. Got to follow the routine.
Name is Robert Lamontagne. I live at 64 South River Street. My question has to do with the old Gamache property. There was 4 residents on it and a huge business building on it. The town has bought that, and is it planned to be an open,
You'll have to ask the council on
or,
that one.
or if they plan on selling, you know?
We
I'm
wouldn't
just
have
curious.
anything to
What
do with
what
that.
I'm
No,
looking
they
at is
did-
how many divisions could they
They
do on
didn't
that?
tell us about the Kelly Fredette buying the lot either, so we weren't aware of that, or we wouldn't have done it, so.
Okay. And my other question was, this is for my own understanding, when you were talking about open space, when they're going to build up a building, let's say I put a nice
Costello
3-story high-rise, like a U-shape, in the middle of it, you would have to maintain an open space?
That's if somebody bought the property and combined some of the lots, because they wouldn't be able to do it.
All right.
Then they would have to have an open space, but I guess the way it's written was public.
Like the people from downtown, in the middle, the vagrants could come in and sit on their parks, on their benches, and I'm paying maybe a $1,000 or $1,500 a month rent, and I'm going to come out and watch your guy. Maybe that's
Well, that's,
lovely. I mean, that's the reality of life.
yeah,
Thank you, by the way.
okay, thank you.
I was impressed.
Yes, sir, come forward.
Again, it's Jay Stradinger, 35 North River. It was my original request to change Gateway 1 and North River to Zone 2 as residential, and we talked through it that no, municipal is better, but perhaps I didn't make myself clear. It is still my preference to be residential.
It is residential.
And North River. The proposal is still municipal.
No,
I
That's-
understand that,
municipal is that it could be built there, but it is residential. It's allowable for the municipal to go in there. You have to look at the
proposed
chart.
change is to be municipal. Is
I'm
that not
sorry?
correct? The proposed change is to be municipal. Is that not correct?
No, it's one of the proposed uses in residential. You could have a town hall annex next to you, but you still would be residential.
Is the word municipal in the proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. My point is,
Sir, you have to go to the chart. It's called Table 2, and I don't know what thing you have. Oh, you don't have the
They
chart.
don't have the chart. They only
It was
have.
posted on the thing.
Yes.
And
I
it
understand
gives
it's
the uses that-
residential now,
It
but one
gives
of the
the uses,
proposals,
it gives the uses that are allowed in that zone.
Yes.
One is a cemetery, another is a library, another is municipal use, another is parks and playground, another is schools and public and private buildings.
Thank
And
you.
the residential is single-family residential.
I understand.
So all of those,
I
if
don't want
somebody should buy
municipal
your-
is what I'm saying. I do not want it.
You do not want what?
Municipal.
At all?
Correct. I
But
would
this
like
is
it to be
only-
zoned as 2. That's what I'm trying to clarify.
Sarah's information and giving it to the gentleman.
You're right.
So that he can see. I understand what you're saying, but it is a proposed use. It's one of many. You can't just,
No.
What I think he's concerned is if his neighbors sell out on him, then he's gonna be surrounded by all these public areas in his residential home.
Municipal is,
Parks, libraries, all of them.
right.
Yeah.
That's what he's concerned with.
Bless you.
So we're talking about South River to be
Well,
zoned as Gateway 2.
if you
Why
look
couldn't
at-
we put North River up to the pumping station as Gateway 2 as well?
We'll take a look at Gateway 2 and see what is allowed there, and those are a lot more. Yours is fairly restricted.
If you actually go and take a look at R33, those uses, in essence, a bunch of them are already allowed in there. So even if you didn't change the zoning, it's still allowed. So, I think people are hung up on changing a use when what we're doing is we're defining these areas and what we want to do in these areas, what we are looking for those areas. And a lot of the uses are already allowed, just staying exactly like it is. So I think that that's something important I think we need to look at too, as when we change these uses, which ones are already there in the first place? Because I think that the public is afraid they're hearing these specific uses, and number one, we don't have a definition for what that use is, because that's really important. And number two, we need to know what the changes are, so then people can understand what they're possibly inviting into their neighborhood area, whatever that zone is that they're concerned about.
I don't know
So
if you could for the next
changing
meeting,
this
take
to
this
Gateway 1,
chart,
North
allowable
River pivotal
uses,
to
and
the train station
put the
coming in?
allowable uses that are presently, and then they can have a side-by-side.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be good.
And then you can compare what is allowed now with what is allowed here. But if you select, and you can take, if she handed it to you,
you got one now.
and take a look at column 2, which is, I'm sorry, column 1 is where he is now, that he says he doesn't want. If you take a look at 2, you've got many more that you may not want.
Right, because the only thing that I would like to point out is that, the municipal use is allowed in every zone. So even though, there's a residential aspect to Zone 2, there's a residential aspect to Zone 3, and there's a residential and commercial aspect to Zone, 4 and
I didn't know
5.
that.
Municipal is allowed in every zone. So just because we call it municipal, we're using that as, sort of a catchword where, in reality, the municipal is basically all in Zone 1, but in reality, it is allowed in all the other zones also. And I think that, the problem that unless you have this matrix and you're looking at the matrix, you don't get you don't appreciate of all the other things that are allowed in one zone that might not be allowed in a zone that you really want to get into. So maybe if when you start studying the matrix, it'll start opening your eyes as to, how many other uses might be allowed that are really detrimental that you might not want. And, maybe, municipal is not so bad because it's still allowed in every zone, no matter, regardless of what zone you're in.
I will do that.
Again, so have the present zoning grid done, and then and this one also, and maybe that'll help them understand. Yes, sir, or ma'am, I'm sorry. Sort of dark, well. I do like those shirts. I think they're great.
Thank you. Earlene Preventure on 94 South River Street. You're saying that all the land uses are municipal, but what we're looking at, the people out here, they're allowable, but it doesn't say it in here, and that's what we're looking at, and that's why we're confused. Thank you.
That's why I said we'll try to have the charts for you, the present that would cover the present and one that covers the proposed, and maybe it'll help you a little bit.
Well, it'll fill in a big blank.
I hope so.
They don't have something that we're looking at, so it's hard for them to understand what we're talking about.
Exactly.
Well, we don't even have the present one.
And we don't even have the definitions for some of them. So then they're like, what's municipal mean? What are you talking about? Does that mean what? So, and I think it's important to know exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, anyone else? All right, come on. That's what we're here for. And that's what you're here for.
Pat Gaskell, 94 South River Street. I still want to go back to the open space as, like Mr. Nelson said, devaluing your property. If that was the case, we can open up the whole town to open space, but you'd devalue all of Enfield if you opened it up to open space. A property is less value in open space than it is on the open market. That's the problem I have with this. It's a huge problem. Open space.
I'm confused.
I am too.
I'm
That's
sure
what
you're confused, but I'm
Yeah.
confused. This is going to sound terrible, but one is we look at the health and safety and all that other stuff, but we don't have any control on how something is taxed. So we can't say for sure that Mr. Smith is going to lose money on his house or on his property because it's zoned a certain way.
Well, you do with commercial properties,
We don't have anything to do with taxes.
but you're zoning the area. So you are in control of how it's going to be taxed.
Ken, you're still a realtor, right? How does it affect? Does it affect?
Well, I mean, if you're grandfathered in and you go to insure your house, a lot of insurance companies won't insure it because if it burns down, it can't be replaced. And you're saying that's not the case. Well, Enfield went from 12 to 18 months. It is the case. And that is also an issue that would affect their properties if there was a flood that came through.
But he's
Wiped
saying,
out all of North and South River Street.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
By the time FEMA got in, did what they're gonna do, like we see going on all around the country, and it was 18 months from now,
but if your parcel,
that
no,
part, but he's talking about
but if your
open
parcel
space.
is next to open space, Ken,
Yeah.
is your house worth less?
well, it depends what the open space
Thank
is.
you.
Right.
Well, that's right.
Right. So, like if Mr. Nelson said before, if all my neighbors sell out and it becomes a big old park,
Yeah, but they'd have to come here to have the park. And then you'd get to talk. And the neighbors would get to talk.
Well, the town would be the park.
the town would be
Yeah,
the
but we
park.
could deny it.
Yeah, but it comes through us for.
Could be not denied.
Yeah, but why would it be denied if we put
Right.
it in the regulation?
You
Right.
could also do setbacks.
It is very confusing
Well,
for everyone.
yeah, it is,
I
because
see.
zoning itself is, and that's why we have, Well, they're not all
That's
here,
why we
but
have
we have
planners.
7 people that vote on these things.
Right.
And you need at least 4 of us to agree.
And not all spots are good for certain things. It might be in the regulations it's allowed in the district, but in one lot or one area or one street, it might not be a good idea. So it's not just a blank slate, yes, you get it.
So why wouldn't you go with open space on all of Enfield?
Well,
Well,
Enfield
this
does have
probably is
open
allowed.
space.
I'm talking about every bit of it.
Well,
If it
Well, they
doesn't
do.
affect
we
anything.
take 50 acres of land, and we come to this commission to do a subdivision.
That's right.
That subdivision can be what we call a fee in lieu of open space or open space. The fee in lieu is for every single lot we get developed or split off of that property. Instead of giving the town part of the land, we give them a fee instead. Now, the town is supposed to take all that money that they accrue and buy parcels or connect parcels to create parks and, walking trails and stuff like that. Now, open space is where the developer has 50 acres and he says to the commission, look, out of the 50 acres, I want to build 40 of them. I'm going to give the town 10 acres. Now, that 10 acres could be used for a park or anything, and it's supposed to be for that area, but it's supposed to be usable land.
For public use,
Enfield
right.
has kind of gotten off track and
years,
taken
yeah.
some real valueless land as open space, which you couldn't walk through. You'd need a rowboat to get through it, and that's not what it's meant for. Do you have a legit concern? Absolutely you do. You know you live next door to a house right now, and you want to make sure it stays that way. With this regulation, could that change? Yes.
Right.
That is the simple answer, and I see your concerns, and I
But
understand
it could
totally.
change, it could change under the present zoning too.
It could.
So it really,
But that's why they're looking for clarification, and either Ginny or Mary said it, what's there right now? Because he doesn't know and I don't know, because neither one of us have thought about that, and she brought it up.
Yep.
And it may be existing right now, so that would kind of put it to rest. It wouldn't make them feel any better, but we're not changing anything.
that's why I said, when you get the two, and they get the present and the past, or the future rather, and the present, you can
Instead of
compare them.
Right, you're right, Charlie. Instead of changing all this, we may only be changing one page.
That's,
And
that's right.
It simplifies it, especially for me, because it's a lot less
Oh, yeah.
reading than I
You've got to have
to
the
do.
two charts side by side.
All right. Thank you.
All right, we're trying, it's like you complained about notification, and we had signs put up down to on the main entrances, so.
Jen's got some.
Jen,
Yes. So when you guys changed that portion of South River Street, that sort of came about because that idea of the easement for the walking path was coming along, and so now that's gone. But you did, if I'm remembering correctly, you changed that South River Street zone to accommodate that walkway. So if that walkway isn't being put in, just a thought, I don't know if you guys would want to change that back to what it was before, which was River Gateway 2.
Put it
It's
back.
River Gateway 1.
Yep, problem solved there.
oh, yeah,
No, this is
that's
the
what
old
Rich said before.
So make north end.
So, I mean, we can change it, but we would need direction. Obviously, we're not going to change anything without your.
Come on, Karen, start your way up here, I gotta let you
Consensus.
talk. Wait till she finishes.
She'll set us straight.
Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple
Just
Street.
let her finish first.
Okay, go ahead.
That's all I was going to
Okay.
say.
Go ahead, Karen.
The reason I recommended Rivergate 1 instead of 2 was because it was more restrictive. If you go to Rivergate 2, I just want them to realize
I said that.
you're going to do, and Rich has said this, Charlie said it, single family, 2 family, 3 and 4 family, 5 units plus residential, assisted living, boarding, rooming houses, community residences, congregate housing, housing for the elderly, senior residential development. That could happen if somebody decides to sell a couple lots, and they can put this in there. So the RG1 allows your single-family houses, and that's it. The Gamache property came up. The town owns that property. They could turn around and sell that property, and somebody could develop a senior residential development there, and it would look horrible as far as I'm concerned with the rest of the neighborhood. But it's a big piece, and who knows what's going to happen with that. It would be restricted to single-family houses if we just kept it RG1. I don't care what they do. If they want the ability to put all these different things on these lots, do it. I don't know. But to me, if I lived there, I wouldn't want to go to RG2.
Well, that's the problem, and with communication has been.
The open space doesn't mean anything, because the open space can go anywhere in the whole town.
That's right.
It can go anywhere. So I can live next to it. I would rather live next to open space or a cemetery than somebody who has a bunch of trash in their yard. So, open space can go both ways.
That's why communication was very important when we were doing this is the best attendance that we'd had in all of our meetings, really. I think Steve
was at most.
Steve was at most of them. And I recognize a few others. I think there are about 3 or 4 right. And that was it. And tonight is the best. This is what we've wanted. Yeah, I know it.
Isn't there a reason?
Anyone else? Call again. Anyone else? Last call. I'll close this hearing. Yes. Oh, yes. Okay.
I was like, yes.
Okay.
Could I just ask?
Thank you. This is what we had hoped for.
Now that nobody's here.
We've been working on it all these times. I don't know.
I'm just curious as to how you all found out about this meeting. Did you see the legal ad? Did you see the sign?
Steve had something to do with it, and some of the others.
Mostly the Grapevine website? So Steve found out and you all found out? No, I'm just trying to find out in the future how best to do this, because, we put out a couple of the little freestanding signs. We did put it in the paper. It's been on the website. So.
Notice that came out.
In the paper?
No, electronic.
Oh, the news blast?
Okay.
Okay, the news blast. Okay.
And he tells the bird, and the bird goes flying around to tell everybody.
We need more birds.
The only problem is you didn't extend it up to Alden Avenue and that area too, because they're involved.
That is true, but we are close knit. South River Street. And we're all the residents. The little bird flies around, tells everybody.
The property owners over here.
We need to find that little bird and put him to rest.
Well, yeah, I know. We need more birds. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, motion's made and seconded. All in favor? What are you rushing for?